Chapter 702. The residence that Tang Ren provided was very luxurious, and there was a relatively independent martial arts practice field and cultivation room. When the disciples of the sect of all times moved in, they could also practice martial arts when they had nothing to do. However, it was such a high-class residence, but in young Master Tang's mouth, the environment was a little worse than an inn. He was indeed rich. Not bad, not bad. Jun Changshao walked around the residence and said, "I've troubled young Master Tang. You and I are business partners. Now that you have come to the Imperial City, this Tang naturally has to do his best to entertain you. I don't dare to relax in the slightest." Tang Ren laughed. Jun Changshao said, "Young Master Tang, is there any fun place in the Imperial City?" It was still far from the start of the dragon and tiger battle. Since they had come to such a big city, they had to find time to go out and play. Tang Ren gave a "I understand" look, and said in a low voice, "There is a red fragrance market in the north of the city, it is a man's paradise. This Tang will bring Jun Patriarch there tonight." Man's paradise? Jun Changshao's mouth twitched and said, "Young Master Tang, you misunderstood, I'm not referring to the brothel." Understood, understood. Tang Ren said in a low voice, "If Jun Patriarch doesn't like to go out and play, there's no problem in the residence." Jun Changshao almost couldn't help but kick him out. Previously, he thought that he was a smart person, but now he seemed a little stupid, or was the word pervert written on his face? Tang Ren couldn't be blamed for misunderstanding. After all, men, if they looked for fun places, it would be easy for them to misunderstand. Moreover, as a direct descendant of a big family, they all had their own circle of friends. Every time they gathered, they would go to the brothel to seek pleasure. At night, Tang Ren held a banquet to invite Jun Changshao and the disciples of the sect of all times. After drinking, Jun Changshao returned to his room to rest. Just as he entered the courtyard, he saw two beautiful women standing at the door. "Sorry, wrong door." Jun Changshao hurriedly turned around and retreated, but after walking out, he touched his head and said, "No, this is my residence." He walked in again and said, "You too, did you come to the wrong place?" Young Master Jun, a beautiful woman, smiled and said, "We are here to serve you." Her voice was bone-numbing, causing one's imagination to run wild. Jun Changshao, this Tang Ren really thought of himself as a lecher. He actually arranged for two beauties to serve him in bed. Jun Changshao said with a straight face, "I don't need it. You can go back." The enchanting woman walked down gracefully and said with a smile, "Young Master Tang has instructed us to serve young Master Jun." Jun Patriarch had already drunk some wine. When he heard the bone-numbing sound, his mind immediately rippled. No, no. He had come to the great senior royal city to participate in the dragon-tiger battle for hegemony, so how could he indulge himself in women's charms? Jun Changshao's mind suddenly became clear and he said in a deep voice, "Leave now, or don't blame me for being ruthless." His voice contained an inviolable imperial might, causing the two gorgeously dressed beauties' expressions to change slightly. They hurriedly bowed and left. Was it because her appearance wasn't outstanding enough to attract young Master Tang's friend? No. You two are very outstanding, but Jun Patriarch, phew. After the two women left, Jun Changshao let out a long sigh of relief. The temptation of beauty was really a bit tricky. He almost couldn't calm his mind and chose to indulge. "Don't look," Jun Changshao said in a bad mood, "drive them away." Swoosh! Swoosh! In an instant, Su Xiaoma, Li Fei and the others hurriedly retracted their spiritual senses from the courtyard. Eldest senior sister. Ling Yuanxue said with a smile, "I told you Patriarch is a gentleman." Lu Qianqian said lightly, "He already knew that we were watching. Otherwise, he would be hugging left and right now." The next day, Jun Changshao called Tang Ren over and said with a serious face, "Young Master Tang, I have always been clean and honest. I don't need others to serve me." Understood, understood. Tang Ren transmitted his voice, "Jun Patriarch, there are so many disciples here. It's my mistake. I didn't think it through. Next time, I will be sneaky. Jun Changshao almost vomited blood. It was all his fault. He said that there was no fun place. In the end, he made this guy think that he was really a lecher. The sects of the various provinces entered the imperial city one after another, and the number of people in the city increased day by day. Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, and the others rarely went out. They spent their time on cultivation, hoping to be in their best condition to welcome the dragon-tiger battle for hegemony. Although Jun Patriarch occasionally went out for a stroll, he still spent more time on inquiring about the details of the various sections. After all, only by knowing yourself and your enemy can you win 100 battles. Jun Patriarch. Tang Ren took out a large stack of information and said, "These are all the information of the participating forces of the Zhongzuan province." Jun Changshao started flipping through the pages. Tang Ren sat down and drank a mouthful of tea, then said, "Jun Patriarch, although there are first-rate sects participating in this year's dragon-tiger battle for hegemony, you must pay more attention to the disciples of the second and third-rate sections." Jun Changshao asked, "Why?" Tang Ren said, "The disciples sent by the first-rate sects might not be the best. Only the second and third-rate sects will go all out." "For example?" Jun Changshao said. Tang Ren took out a copy of the information and said, "For example, this second-rate world-defying sacred sect sent the young patriarch, Ao Wushuang, to participate. This person had already broken through to the martial king realm a few years ago. His strength is extremely strong." Ao Wushuang. Jun Changshao remembered this person. Tang Ren took out another set of information and said, "And this Zhao Dezhuang." Zhao Dezhuang. The corner of Jun Changshao's mouth twitched violently. The disciples of the sects participating in the dragon-tiger battle for hegemony were all outstanding geniuses. There was actually someone who would give such a lame name. Tang Ren said, "Although Zhao Dezhuang's name is ordinary, he has an indestructible diamond body. He is a person with an extremely strong physical body." Indestructible diamond body? Jun Changshao was astonished. As a young man from the modern era, he immediately thought of a way to break the move. 1. Kick the crotch. 2. Stab the eyes. There is also Jian Feiyan. Tang Ren said, "This is a disciple of a third-rate sword sect. He is obsessed with the way of the sword. It is said that he has comprehended the word fast. He is the fastest sword cultivator in the younger generation. There is also a disciple of the High Heaven Sacred Sect. He has already entered the martial king realm at such a young age. Moreover, he has comprehended the sect's martial arts to the extreme. He can casually use saint-level martial arts." He took out several sets of information, all of which were the most eye-catching sect disciples participating in the dragon-tiger battle for hegemony. Jun Changshao said, "The dragon-tiger battle for hegemony is truly a gathering of dragons and tigers." Tang Ren said, "These are just the more outstanding disciples. In fact, every sect's participating disciples are very strong. Since Jun Patriarch has brought disciples to participate, we must not be careless." "Yes." Jun Changshao's expression became serious. The dragon-tiger battle for hegemony was approaching. In the most central area of the imperial city, the construction of the arena for the sect's disciples to compete in began. It was an extremely large arena with spectator stands around it. It could accommodate 500,000 martial artists. The most amazing thing was, above the arena, there was a mirror-like array erected. From Tang Ren, Jun Changshao learned that this was a projection array. It could capture the battle in the arena and broadcast it in real time for the martial artists in the city to watch. Damn! It was a live broadcast. Jun Changshao said, "Will the battle scene be transmitted to other provinces?" "Yes." Tang Ren said, "The dragon-tiger battle for hegemony is the highest level of sect competition in the Starfall continent. At that time, all the provinces and cities will set up a projection array, allowing martial artists to witness it in person." "That's amazing," Jun Changshao said. He did not expect the other world to be able to use the array to such an extent. Would it become a live broadcast mode in the future? Or a bullet screen? If it was even more awesome, it would be able to contact the distant Earth and transmit it to the internet. Would it not allow the weaklings to watch the battle scenes of the world of martial arts from their computers and phones? Chapter 703. The organizers of the Dragon and Tiger competition were very efficient. In just a few days, the venue for the competition had been built. The spectator stands were divided into many levels. Some were for ordinary warriors, some were for families and sects, and there was also a VIP area for the elders of the participating sections. With Jun Changxiao's identity as the patriarch, he was a VIP. At the same time, projection arrays were set up one after another in the cities of the 9 states. This was a very expensive project because every array formation required a large number of array masters to set it up. Of course, the cities had to pay the organizers a broadcasting fee to set up the projection arrays. The live broadcast of every dragon and tiger battle for hegemony was a very good source of income. Jun Changxiao stood in the courtyard and looked at the huge projection array. If we can sponsor it and put up the recruitment slogan of the sect of all times, it will definitely attract many applicants. This idea was very earthly. It was a pity that such a grand competition did not allow advertisements. Otherwise, it would be very annoying to broadcast an advertisement every time there was a match. Jun Patriarch. Tang Ren walked in and said in surprise, "Today is the registration day. Why haven't you left yet?" In fact, Yi Tianxing had already registered the sect of all times a few months ago. Now that the competition was about to start, the organizers naturally had to check if the participating sects had arrived. "No rush, no rush." Jun Changxiao said, "There will definitely be many people going at this time. Let's wait a little longer. I happen to know the person in charge of the registration." Tang Ren said, "There's no need to let Jun Patriarch queue up for registration." Jun Changxiao said, "Then let's go." The registration area was at the newly built arena. At this moment, many of the upper echelons of the sects had already gathered here and were waiting for the organizers to review them in order. "Isn't this elderly? We haven't seen each other for a while." Patriarch Song's cultivation has become more profound. It was inevitable that the elders of the various sects would meet acquaintances, so they chatted enthusiastically. Not long after, Tang Ren brought Jun Changxiao to the registration area and then entered a temporary tent. There were many people inside who were there to cut the queue. Tang Ren suddenly felt a little awkward. He had thought that he could use his connections to help Jun Patriarch pass the assessment in advance, but he didn't expect that there would be so many sects taking shortcuts. "Isn't this the second young master of the Tang clan?" A young man laughed. The 2 old men standing at the side emitted a vigorous aura. They were the elders of the brilliant gold holy sect who had come to participate in the dragon-tiger battle for hegemony. Because they weren't from the central sovereign state, they had specially found a direct descendant of the Yen clan to enter through the back door, hoping to pass the examination faster. "Young Master Yen," Tang Ren said with a fake smile. The Yen family was a martial arts family in the imperial city and was very powerful. This young Master Yen had never liked the direct descendants of the clan who did business. He liked to choke people with his words when he had nothing to do. If it weren't for the fact that they were both living in the city and seeing each other all the time, Tang Ren wouldn't have bothered with him. "Second young Master Tang." Young Master Yen smiled and asked, "And this is?" "This Tang's friend," Tang Ren said indifferently. "Oh?" Young Master Yen smiled and said, "Second young Master Tang brought him here. Could it be that he's also a high-ranking member of some sect participating in the Dragon-Tiger battle for supremacy?" Jun Changxiao said, "That's right." The 2 elders of the Golden Brilliance holy sect behind him were stunned when they heard this. This young man was at most 20 years old. Could he be a high-ranking member of some sect? "Which sect are you from?" Young Master Yen asked. Jun Changxiao said, "You don't have the qualifications to know. If you want to ask, you have to ask your elders in person." From the short conversation, he could see that young Master Yen was a little arrogant and there was a hint of ridicule in his words. He was a person who deserved a beating. The best way to deal with such a person was to not talk nonsense and directly ask him. I don't have the qualifications. The proud and arrogant young Master Yen suddenly had a trace of anger in his eyes. Friend. An elder of the Golden Brilliance Holy Sect said indifferently, I wonder if this old man is qualified to know. Who are you? Second-rate elder of the Golden Brilliance Holy Sect, Duan Zisho. You're barely qualified. Still? Barely qualified? Duan Zisho's face darkened and said coldly, this little friend is so arrogant. I wonder which sect you are from. Not big. Jun Changshao shrugged and said, it's just a small sect of all times. Sect of all times? Duan Zisho said in shock, you're Jun Changshao. Shwa. Jun Changshao opened his folding fan and said, that's right, it's June. There were no decorations on the fan, only 4 words were written on it handsome. Without a doubt. This was prepared by Jun Patriarch himself. Usually, he would put it in his spatial ring and take it out to show off when he had nothing to do. When the martial artists saw the 4 words on the fan, they immediately had the urge to beat him up. So it's Jun Patriarch. Duan Zisho smiled coldly and said, sorry. The Golden Brilliance Holy Sect came from the Eastern Haozhou. Some time ago, the Sect of all times went to challenge the Lily Holy Sect and beat the disciples of the various sects there. Young Master Yen said in disdain, I thought you were some amazing person, but you're just the patriarch of a 5th-rate sect. He had definitely heard of the Sect of all times before. It was undeniable that they had done many amazing things during this period of time. But this time, there were many 1st- and 2nd-rate sects that came to participate in the Dragon Tiger battle for hegemony. For example, the Golden Brilliance Holy Sect. Their overall strength was stronger than the Lily Holy Sect. When they asked him for help, he was polite. Where did the leader of a 5th-rate sect get the courage to think that he was not qualified to know which sect he came from? Next. At this moment, the old man sitting in the tent shouted. Young Master Yen looked coldly at Jun Changshao, then brought the 2 elders of the Golden Brilliance Holy Sect to verify. Jun Patriarch. After passing the verification, Duan Zisho walked past him and said in a low voice, you better pray that you don't meet my Golden Brilliance Holy Sect in the first round. Oh. Jun Changshao replied with a smile. Duan Zisho waved his sleeves and left. Young Master Yen also deliberately stopped when he passed by. He looked at Jun Changshao, then looked at young Master Tang, shook his head and said, young Master Tang's friends are all from 1st- and 2nd-rate sects, but second young Master Tang is with such a sect, there is really no comparison. Young Master Yen. Tang Ren smiled and said, you don't have to worry about my matters. As a person who had been in the business world, he naturally would not be emotional easily. Jun Changshao. Young Master Yen said indifferently, I hope that your arrogance and pride can be maintained until the end of the Dragon Tiger battle for hegemony. I also hope that you can leave in high spirits, and not slip away with your disciples. Jun Changshao said, I will not let young Master Yen down, I will definitely persist until the end, and I will definitely leave in high spirits. Humph, young Master Yen sneered, then turned and left. Young Master Tang. Jun Changshao touched his nose and said, this guy is a bit asking for a beating. Tang Ren said, Jun Patriarch, no need to pay attention to him. Not long after, it was Jun Changshao's turn. He walked up and reported his sect's token and disciple quota. Let's wait for the Dragon Tiger battle for hegemony in a few days. After returning to his residence, Jun Changshao continued to study the information of the various sects, and specifically found the Golden Brilliance Holy Sect. When he saw that they belonged to the Eastern Haozhou, he understood why they were acting strangely towards him. Sigh. Bringing Xiao Ziji to challenge the Lily Holy Sect was equivalent to offending all the sects in this state. A few days later, the Dragon Tiger battle for hegemony venue was decorated with lanterns and colored banners, and it was extraordinarily lively. On the well-developed streets, many martial artists rushed in like a flood. Today was the day of the dragon-tiger battle for hegemony. Jun Changshao had deliberately changed into a set of decent clothes and walked with his feet splayed outwards, swaggering towards the venue with his disciples. Patriarch. Su Xiaoma's eyes were very sharp. He pointed to the front and said, "The people from Miaohua Palace are here too." Jun Changshao looked towards the sea of people and saw Shi Jingxian being supported by Li Er. He shook his head and said, "It seems that the tranquil heart lotus did not cure her eye disease." Chapter 704. Shi Jingxian, who looked rather weak, walked in the sea of people like a bright pearl, appearing so dazzling. The cultivators passing by would subconsciously look over and marvel at her appearance. However, after seeing this woman's empty eyes, they couldn't help but guess that there might be something wrong with her eyes. No wonder she had to be supported by someone. Sigh. Such a beautiful woman was suffering from an eye disease. It was really heartbreaking. Li Er. Shi Jingxian, who was walking on the road, whispered, "Have you seen Jun Patriarch?" The ingenious Flower Palace didn't participate in the battle of dragons and tigers, but the Sect of all times did, so she rushed over after hearing the news. Palace Master. Li Er was speechless. "You've asked 800 times. Have I?" Shi Jingxian calculated in her mind. "I think it's only been 80 times. Li Er, ever since the Palace Master met that guy, she couldn't forget him. Could it be that she really had feelings for him?" Li Er. Shi Jingxian said, "Look carefully." Li Er said perfunctorily, "Palace Master, there are too many people." Then, she stopped abruptly. Because she just happened to see someone walking over from the corner of her eyes. Jun Changshao. Palace Master Shi. Jun Changshao said, "What a coincidence to meet in the great sage's imperial city." Hearing the familiar voice, Shi Jingxian hurriedly turned around with a happy smile on her face. Jun Patriarch. Li Er. Previously, the palace master insisted on going to the Lily Holy Sect but was forcefully stopped by the elders, so she had been sulking. Now that she saw that guy, she smiled. This was definitely true love. Palace Master Shi. Jun Changshao transmitted his voice. "Is the tranquil heart lotus useless?" "Yes." Shi Jingxian said. Jun Changshao comforted her. "Don't be discouraged, your illness will be cured sooner or later." Shi Jingxian smiled. "I'm already used to it. By the way," she said apologetically, "previously, when you took your disciples to challenge the Lily Holy Sect, I wanted to go and cheer them on, but I was busy with sect affairs and was delayed." In fact, she really wanted to go. However, they were forcefully stopped by Zhangsun Fanghua and Leng Xingyue. Their reason was that this was a grudge between their sects, so how could they participate? "Alright then. Then I won't go. But this time, you can't stop me from going to the central sovereign state, right?" Zhangsun Fanghua and Leng Xingyu could not stop them. After all, the dragon and tiger battle for supremacy was the greatest event of the continent, so it was very normal for them to come and watch the excitement. Jun Changshao said, "I'm fine." He was already very grateful for the thought. Palace Master Shi. Jun Changshao said, "The battle of dragons and tigers is about to begin. I still have to bring my disciples to the venue, so I'll take my leave first." Shi Jingxian smiled and said, "Your sect's disciples will definitely achieve good results." "Thank you." Jun Changshao led his disciples forward. Senior apprentice brother. On the way, Li Fei whispered, "This palatial master Shi seems to be interested in the patriarch." Su Xiaoma said, "I saw that long ago. Palace Master Shi and our patriarch are quite compatible," Li Fei said. Smack! Jun Changshao hit his head and said, "The dragon and tiger battle for supremacy is about to begin. Focus on the important points." "Yes." Li Fei held his head and said. At the venue of the dragon and tiger battle for supremacy. After Jun Changshao took out his participation token, he walked in under the guidance of a person. Just like the previous Azure Sun County Grand competition, all the participating disciples would be arranged in a few specific areas before the competition began. June Patriarch. The person leading the way said, "I've arranged everything. Please follow me to the spectator platform." Okay. Before June Changshao left, he looked at the disciples and reminded, "Since you're participating, play seriously. Don't let your guard down." Yes. All the disciples shouted in unison. The dragon and tiger battle for supremacy was a gathering of geniuses. They would definitely treat it seriously. Long Xiang clenched his fists and said with a burning gaze, "I'm a little excited." Me too, Song Xianzhou said. Thinking about how they would be able to compete with the geniuses of the various sects in front of everyone, they couldn't control their emotions. The cultivators of the counties in southwest Yangzhou were even more excited than them. Although the projection array formation hadn't been activated and was still blank, there was already a sea of people below. In the previous competitions, there would also be many people watching. However, this competition undoubtedly received the most attention because the one representing southwest Yangzhou in the dragon and tiger battle for supremacy was the sect of all times. This sect had brought too many surprises and shocks to everyone. They all hoped that they could break the curse and successfully advance to the second round. Therefore, the sect of all times wasn't fighting for themselves. That group of young and energetic disciples carried the hopes of all the people of southwest Yangzhou. Longyang City, Long family. Long Padian stood in the courtyard and looked at the floating array formation. Although he looked shocked, his hands were trembling violently. Family head. An elder said, "Don't be so excited." Long Padian couldn't control his emotions and said loudly, "Xiang is representing the sect of all times in the dragon and tiger battle for supremacy. It's the glory of our family. How can I not be excited?" The elder was silent. Our Long family's patriarch can be considered to be strong enough. Family head Li and Old Master Song were so excited that they almost couldn't stand properly. As a father, who didn't want their children to have a bright future? Today, Li Qingyang and Song Xianzhou were representing southwest Yangzhou in the dragon and tiger battle for supremacy. They would be competing with the top geniuses of the continent. That was a great honor. My son has participated in the dragon and tiger battle for supremacy. This sentence, this matter, was enough to brag about for the rest of his life. In the VIP area of the spectator platform, June Changshao walked in under the guidance of a person and found a seat belonging to the sect of all times. This was the best spectator area. One could see everything from any of the arenas in the center of the arena. The VIP area was already filled with elders from various sections. They all looked at June Changshao, who had just walked in, and thought to themselves, "Is this the patriarch of the sect of all times? He's already a sword king at such a young age. He can be considered a rare genius." Golden Brilliance Holy Sect's Duan Zisho was also present. He laughed coldly and thought to himself, "I really hope that my opponent in the first round is the sect of all times." Many big shots had the same thought. After all, among all the sects, only the sect of all times was a fifth-rate sect. Against such an opponent, they would undoubtedly enter the second round with the least amount of energy. June Changshao leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes to rest. If he knew that all the elders wanted to be matched against their own sects, he would definitely laugh. "I can't guarantee against a first or second-rate sect, but if I'm matched against a third or fourth-rate sect, my disciple can beat your disciple to a pulp." Wang! Suddenly, the projection array in the air trembled and the scene in the arena gradually appeared. At the same time, the array set up in the continent cities also began to appear. "It's activated. We can finally watch it." The cultivators from all the counties and cities were instantly excited. However, after the image was completely clear, a large face suddenly appeared in the projection array. Then, it stroked its hair in a very flirtatious manner and said, "The Eternal Sect has always been recruiting from the outside. Those who are interested can come to the Azure Sun County to consult." Whoosh! Whoosh! Two Wu Huang-level experts flew over and grabbed Jun Changxiao's arms, pulling him back. "Come on, young man." Although he was being pulled away, he still shouted at the projection array, "Join my sect and let's dream fly together." The audience of the continent, Yi Tianqing, Situ Haoyun, Ma Yinteng, and the others watched as Jun Patriarch was taken away by the two experts. Their mouths twitched violently. He was probably the only one who could think of and do something like promoting his sect to the projection array. Chapter 705. In the past Dragon and Tiger battle for supremacy, the projection array would be activated first for all the martial artists to watch. However, when the array was activated this time, the scene that appeared in front of everyone was not the competition venue but Jun Changxiao's handsome face. He was openly advertising in front of the camera. This kind of suffocating operation was really unexpected. Fortunately, the organizers' emergency response was very strong. When they saw someone approaching the array, they hurriedly sent two Wu Huang to pull that bitch down. Therefore, everyone in the mainland saw Jun Changxiao being forcibly taken away by the doctors like a severely ill mental patient. The person who was pulled away just now was the patriarch of the sect of all times. He is so young. He is probably the first person in history who dares to advertise his sect in the upcoming Dragon and Tiger battle for supremacy. When Gosheng appeared on the screen of the array, everyone remembered him instantly. They also remembered the recruitment words he shouted just now. "Join my sect and let your dreams fly together." It sounded very interesting. Many youths had a strong interest in the sect of all times. This was the power of advertising. Although many people would ignore it, there would always be people who would take it to heart. Therefore, Jun Patriarch took the risk of being expelled to advertise forcefully. It was still effective. I admire him. Tang Ren's eyes were full of admiration. The Dragon and Tiger battle for supremacy was about to begin. It was bound to attract the attention of the world. If he went up to advertise his sect, it would definitely bring him great benefits. If he could also advertise his elixir store on the array, it would definitely become popular in the mainland. Wait a minute. The projection array was set up high in the sky. How did Jun Patriarch get up there? The elders of the various sects present also realized this problem. Therefore, when they saw that guy being dragged down by the two experts, they exclaimed, "He is Wu Huang." Regarding Jun Changxiao's strength, the outside world had always thought that he was the sword and martial kings. Even if someone had seen him flying, they would only think that he had used a wing-like treasure. Now, he was suddenly suspended in front of the array without using any tools. He must have flown up with his own strength. An expert said solemnly, "If the sword and martial kings want to break through, they have to comprehend the sword Tao to the extreme." Could it be that that fellow is now the sword and martial emperor? Someone refuted, "The birth of the sword and martial emperors will definitely cause a phenomenon. The continent has been peaceful recently. How can he be the sword and martial emperors? Not bad." Many of the upper echelons of the sects agreed. Back then, in Qingyang City, when that guy broke through to the Sword King and Martial King realm, more than half of the world had witnessed the phenomenon. If he broke through to the Sword King realm, the phenomenon would definitely be even greater. Could it be that he realized that the Sword and Martial Kings had too many restrictions and chose to give up on one of them? It's possible. That guy should be Wu Huang now. His swordsmanship should have been erased. Everyone was discussing this matter. The fact that the patriarch of the sect of all times only had Wu Huang as his cultivation level was the most acceptable to them. However, he had broken through Wu Huang at such a young age. This also shocked the elders of the various sections. No wonder that nameless sect could rise up overnight. It turned out that the patriarch himself was not an ordinary person. Plop! Jun Changxiao sat back in his seat and said angrily, "You didn't even let me finish. So annoying." The corners of everyone's mouth twitched. It was already good enough that he wasn't kicked out by forcefully advertising such a sacred competition. How dare he throw a tantrum? Everyone. At this moment, a deep voice sounded in the venue. On the high platform in the center of the venue, a middle-aged man in brocade clothes appeared out of nowhere. He cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Welcome to this year's Dragon and Tiger Battle for Supremacy. Han Dongsheng, the city lord of the great sage imperial city. He was in charge of this year's Dragon and Tiger Battle for Supremacy." The appearance of the city lord meant that the competition was about to begin, so the audience in the venue immediately became excited. "It's my honor to be able to hold the Dragon and Tiger Battle for Supremacy in the great sage imperial city," City Lord Han said with a smile. Next, he introduced the glorious history of the competition in detail. There was no other way. Such a big competition had to go through the process. Many people in the audience were sleepy. Next, City Lord Han, who had been talking for a long time, suddenly changed the topic and said, "Disciples of the participating sects, please enter the venue." Shwa! Shwa! In an instant, the sleepy audience seemed to have been injected with chicken blood, and they instantly became energetic. "It's starting, it's starting." The cultivators in the various cities also became excited. Not long after, one after another, handsome and extraordinary young men appeared on the light screen of the projection array. Every time a disciple of a sect appeared, someone would shout out the name of the sect, causing the audience to cheer enthusiastically. "Next up is the sect of all times," an old man said in a deep voice. An old man introduced in a deep voice, "This sect has a total of 25 disciples participating in the competition. They are also the only sect from southwest Yangzhou that is participating." The spectator stands instantly became silent. Most of them were from other sects or the family members of the participants. Naturally, they wouldn't cheer for a sect that they didn't know. Sect of all times. Sect of all times. In the Azure Sun City, deafening cheers could be heard from the crowded streets. Loud cheers could also be heard from the other 7 cities. Although the sect of all times wasn't cheering, there were tens of millions of people in the Azure Sun County cheering behind them. Amidst the cheers of the villagers, the 25 disciples of the sect of all times led by Lu Qianqian and Li Qingyang walked out of the passage. The projection array gave each disciple a close-up, causing the entire Azure Sun County to be in an uproar again. "Patriarch!" an old man said excitedly, "It's the young master." Patriarch Li stabilized his body with difficulty, and his hands were trembling uncontrollably. When the 100 sects recruited him, Li Qingyang insisted on joining the Iron Bones sect, which made him very angry. Now that he was standing on the highest level of the sect's tournament, he deeply realized how far-sighted his son was. "Master, the young master is out." When Song Xuanzhou's close-up appeared on the projection array, Patriarch Song sat on the chair. Because of the excitement in his heart, he couldn't support his old body anymore. The child's father is little Mo. A couple in their 50s stood in the crowd. When they saw their son walk out with his head held high, their eyes were already blurred by tears. "Xiang is out." When Long Xiang appeared on the projection array, the direct descendants of the Long family were instantly excited. The happiest ones were definitely the members of the sect of all times. At this moment, tens of thousands of disciples were sitting on the martial arts field, focused on the projection array in front of the main hall. When they saw their senior sisters and senior brothers coming out, they danced and cheered. "Old man." Elder Wei frowned and said, "You secretly intercepted the projection array. If you were discovered, wouldn't you be in trouble?" Zhen Dejuan said solemnly, "If I'm discovered, I'll eat a brick raw." In the faraway Taishan Shengzong, a disciple said in surprise, "The woman who flashed through the array just now looked a little familiar." Lu Qianqian. Tisk Tsk, this woman who was expelled actually joined the sect of all times. From a first-rate sect to a fifth-rate sect, what a tragedy. Ta-ta! From afar, the disciples of the sect of all times stepped onto the stage in the middle of the venue. The 25 of them stood in a neat row with their hands behind their backs. They exuded an aura of steel and iron. The disciples who entered first all turned their heads to look. These are the disciples of the sect of all times. Although they exuded a strong aura, their aura was a little weak. If they met in a competition, they should be able to defeat them easily. Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, and the others were also sizing up the competitors. Especially when they felt the strong aura they exuded, their blood started to boil. Babies. Jun Changshao raised his legs and placed them on the chair in front of him. He said, "Use your strength to prove yourself." Chapter 706. Li Qingyang and the others were already used to using the hidden cultivation technique anytime and anywhere, so their aura was very ordinary. On the other hand, the other sect disciples who entered the arena were all doing their best to show their strongest side in such a grand competition. It was useless. Whether he was powerful or not, he would only know after fighting. Xiao Ziji had been watching the sect disciples enter the arena the entire time. When he saw the rough man who had asked for directions earlier, his eyes immediately flashed with a strong fighting spirit. His intuition told him that this would be a very good opponent. The rough man also looked over and grinned. There was no verbal communication between the two, only eye contact. Jun Changshao rubbed his chin and said, from the introduction, he should be the Iron Fist Sect's disciple, Zhao Dazhuang. Iron Fist Sect. A third-rate sect. They majored in fist techniques, especially in the creation of the physical body. This disciple called Zhao Dazhuang had an indestructible body. If he met his own disciple, he should be able to stage a wonderful battle. I'm looking forward to it. Jun Changshao said. As the organizers continued to shout out the names of the sects, more and more participants entered the venue. Tisk, an arrogant warrior, stood lazily on the high platform and said, "They're all trash. Coming to participate in this kind of competition is nothing more than a waste of time." His name was Ao Wushuang, the world-defying sacred sect's young patriarch. Although this guy appeared to be very arrogant, he had real ability. He had already broken through to the martial king realm a few years ago. In his words, if he was interested in fighting on the Gathering of Heroes list, he would have already occupied the top of the heaven rank. Ao Wushuang looked at a warrior in the distance and said disdainfully, "Trash." The corners of Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, and the others' mouths twitched. Because this guy standing not far away, the trash he was talking about, was Yi Xingchen. Normally, junior brother would always call him trash, but now, he was actually called trash by someone else. "Are you talking about me?" Yi Xingchen's face darkened. Ao Wushuang said indifferently, "What? You still don't admit it when I say you're trash." Crack! Yi Xingchen clenched his fists and said in a low voice, "You'd better not meet me. Otherwise, I'll tear that mouth of yours apart." "Hey!" Ao Wushuang said, "I didn't expect you to be more arrogant than me." Yi Xingchen did not say anything else. With his personality, it was impossible for him to argue with a piece of trash. "Kid! You'd better pray that you don't meet me, otherwise, I'll make sure you don't die." The various sects entered one after another. As the finale, there would definitely be 5 first-rate sections. Although they didn't send out their strongest disciples, the aura they exuded after entering the arena still made many participants feel pressured. The elders of the various sects on the spectator stand prayed silently in their hearts that when the lots were drawn, they would not be drawn against a first-rate sect. Otherwise, they would lose in the first round. Tisk Ao Wushuang said disdainfully, "Still trash." He didn't even put a first-rate sect disciple in his eyes. This guy was really arrogant. The 200 sects participating in the Dragon-Tiger battle were all in position, and the 5,000 participants were on the high platform in the middle. Everyone must be getting impatient from waiting. City Lord Han said loudly, "So, let's not waste any more words. Disciples of the various sects, please step forward and draw your first opponent." Coming. I wonder which sect will be the unlucky one to draw a first-rate sect in the first round. The spectating martial artists watched with rapt attention. "Junior brother." Lu Qianqian said, "You go." As the eldest disciple of the sect, she was supposed to represent the sect of all times to draw an opponent, but because of her personality, she didn't like to show her face in public. "Okay. Li Qingyang stood up and walked over. Senior brother. Su Xiaoma shouted, you must draw a better opponent. The disciples of the various sects nearby all laughed when they heard that. The fifth-rate sects at the bottom would always meet a sect stronger than them no matter how they drew. What kind of better opponent could they meet? They misunderstood. Su Xiaoma didn't mean that the opponent was weak, but that their overall strength was stronger. Only then would they have the desire to battle. June Patriarch. On the spectator stand, Duan Zishou smiled faintly and said, your sect's disciples better not draw my Jinhuang holy sect. Is that so? Jun Changshao smiled and said to himself, Qingyang, have better luck. You must draw Jinhuang holy sect for me, and then beat them like dogs. Ta! Li Qingyang stood on the drawing platform. It was a square box with only a hole that could accommodate a palm. There were many sect tokens inside, and one of them would be the opponent of the first round. Phew, Li Qingyang took a deep breath. His draw would determine the sect's opponent. It was okay to draw a fourth-rate sect, but it would be depressing to draw a first-rate sect. General Manager Li was under great pressure. Yi Tianqing, who was in the Heavenly Mandate Royal City, was even more stressed than him. At this time, his heart was in his throat. In the previous Dragon Tiger battle for hegemony, the sects that were sent were absolutely terrible in drawing lots. For example, the previous one. The opponent was a second-rate sect, and they were eliminated in the first round. For example, the previous one. Although the opponent was a fourth-rate sect, it was from the Zhongzhuang state, and they were eliminated in the first round. God bless. Yi Tianqing prayed secretly. I must draw a fourth-rate sect from another state. Swoosh! Li Qingyang raised his hand and reached into the drawing box. There were tokens inside, and there were restrictions on them. He couldn't use his spiritual senses to see what was written on them. Swoosh! Li Qingyang quickly withdrew his hand. The process was very short, and Yi Tianqing subconsciously closed his eyes. He didn't dare to look. He didn't dare to look. The opponent of the sect of all times is. At this time, City Lord Han's deep voice came from the array light screen. The Great Evolution Holy Sect. Plop! Yi Tianqing fell to the ground and said in despair, a first-rate sect. It's over, it's over. Mu Changhong broke down. 5 first-rate sects were drawn. That kid must not have washed his hands in the toilet. The bustling Qingyang County instantly became abnormally quiet after City Lord Han called out the name of the first-rate sect. This luck, Ma Yinton covered his head and said, no one else. The leaders of the various sects in the Dragon Arc battle venue were also very depressed. After all, they didn't draw their opponents in the first round. This newly risen sect actually drew the Great Development Saint sect. It's over, it's over. Southwest Yangzhou still can't change their fate of being eliminated in the first round. Everyone immediately started discussing. Among them, many martial artists who thought that the sect of all times would be a dark horse shook their heads and sighed helplessly. If this third-rate sect encountered a fourth-rate sect from another state, they might be able to advance. However, if they encountered a first-rate sect in the first round, they would definitely be eliminated. For a moment, the entire audience was focused on Li Qingyang. Even the projection array gave him a close-up. This guy was really lucky to draw a first-rate sect. Sigh. Li Qingyang shook his head and then turned around. He looked at his fellow sect members with a helpless expression and said, I tried my best. Crack crack, Xiao Ziji, Su Xiaoma, and the others shook their heads and clenched their fists. They grinned and said, this is exciting. They were laughing. The audience widened their eyes. Based on the previous plots, shouldn't they be crying and feeling despair after drawing a first-rate sect in the first round? Duan Zishou was also stunned. He he. Suddenly, laughter came from the side. Duan Zishou hurriedly turned his head and saw Jun Changshao leaning on the chair with one leg crossed. He covered his face with one hand and laughed strangely. The first round against a first-rate sect is really exciting. The disciples of the Sect of all times were crazy. The Sect of all times patriarch was also crazy. Chapter 707. When Li Qingyang drew the first-rate Grand Evolution Sacred Sect, everyone was sure that this Dark Horse sect was going to lose. However, when they saw the disciples of the Sect of all times grinning with intense battle intent in their eyes, the audience was dumbfounded. Were they crazy? Or were they forcing themselves to smile because they knew that they had no chance of winning against a first-rate sect in the first round? If that was the case, it was understandable. The disciples of the Sect of all times did not want to face a first-rate sect in the first round. After all, in such a grand competition, it was more interesting to fight from the weak to the strong. However, since they had no other choice, they could only fight. Su Xiaoma and the other disciples who did not fight when they challenged the Lily Sacred Sect felt their blood boiling. Facing a first-rate sect in the first round was undoubtedly very exciting. It's over, Yi Tianqing's eyes were filled with despair. Drawing a first-rate sect in the first round was definitely the worst result that any sect in southwest Yangzhou had in the history of the Dragon Tiger competition. At that moment, he hoped that the Sect of all times would draw a third-rate sect from the middle continent. That way, they would at least have a chance of survival. Although the Grand Evolution Sacred Sect did not send out their strongest lineup, the disciples they brought are also very strong. The Sect of all times will definitely lose. If a fifth-rate sect meets a first-rate sect, you can imagine the outcome even if you think with your toes. The Grand Evolution Sacred Sect is basically guaranteed to enter the second round. Many martial artists discussed and looked at the disciples of the Grand Evolution Sacred Sect in the middle of the field. As expected, they all had smiles on their faces. When they looked at the disciples of the Sect of all times, they even sneered. "Senior brother," a disciple said calmly, "facing a fifth-rate sect in the first round is really not challenging at all. Just nice." Someone said, "We can save some energy to deal with the later opponents." In the eyes of the Grand Evolution Sacred Sect disciples, only the second-rate sects and the other 4 first-rate sects could cause trouble for them. As long as they encountered other sects, they would just be sending themselves to death. However, in the eyes of June Patriarch, this sect was also sending itself to death. No. To be exact, it was sending itself to death. Because when Li Qingyang drew the Grand Evolution Sacred Sect, the side mission was triggered. The content of the mission was very simple. Defeat this first-rate sect in the Dragon Tiger battle. If completed, the reward would be 2 experience talismans. In the past, the rewards would be given after completion. The side mission this time was actually marked with a price tag. No wonder when our Jun Gosheng saw this, he covered his face and let out a strange laughter. If he defeated this sect and obtained the reward, he would be able to use the 2 experience talismans to break through a grade. What are you waiting for? Beat him, beat him, beat him. At that moment, Jun's faces faced Tu's face. Duan Zishou, who didn't know what was going on, thought that he might have realized that his opponent was too strong and couldn't take the blow. That was why he was close to going insane. Sigh. How pitiful. The draw was still ongoing. Sects to sect, of course, many people were happy because they had drawn a low-level sect, but there were also people who were in despair because they had drawn a top-level sect. Let's cut the crap. After drawing lots, City Lord Han announced, the first round of the Dragon Tiger battle for supremacy will now begin. Boom! Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, fireworks bloomed in the sky. It has finally begun. After the fireworks festival ended, all the martial artists in the continent instantly entered a state of excitement. The first battle of the first round, the Sect of all times versus the Grand Evolution Sacred Sect. Disciples from both sides, please enter the stage. Such a grand competition, coupled with City Lord Han's deep and penetrating voice, enhanced the atmosphere to the extreme. Shwa! Shwa! The 25 disciples of the Grand Evolution Sacred Sect appeared on the battle stage, causing the audience to cheer enthusiastically. first-rate sects had a lot of fans. On the other hand, the 25 disciples of the sect of all times appeared on the battle stage, causing the entire venue to quiet down. It didn't matter if there was no audience cheering. As soon as Li Qingyang and the others appeared on the screen, the entire Azure Sun County erupted into thunderous cheers. Although the sect of all times had drawn a first-rate sect, the situation was very grim. Even so, the martial artists and ordinary citizens of the Azure Sun County would still treat them as heroes and cheer for them with passion. Sect of all times, hold on! A martial artist yelled at the top of his lungs. Sect of all times, hold on! Sect of all times, hold on! The cheers from countless people shook the sky of the Azure Sun County. Even some 3-year-old children were affected by the atmosphere. They clenched their fists and yelled at the screen, "Sect of all times, hold on!" Representatives from both sides. An old man stepped onto the stage and said, "Will it be a one-on-one battle or a chaotic battle?" Many disciples would participate in every dragon and tiger battle. They could choose a one-on-one battle or a chaotic battle to determine the winner. Actually, there were one-on-one and group battles at the beginning, but the latter was too time-consuming. Thus, the two battles were combined and the participants were allowed to make their own choices. "Whatever," Li Qingyang said. Su Xiaoma and the others behind him were full of battle intent. To them, it didn't matter if it was a one-on-one battle or a group battle, as long as they could fight to their heart's content. The leading disciple of the Great Development Sacred Sect said calmly, "It's too time-consuming to fight 25 people one by one. Why don't we have a chaotic battle?" "Sure," Li Qingyang said. The old man announced loudly, "The first battle of the first round of the Dragon and Tiger battle will be a chaotic battle." A chaotic battle? The sect of all times is really courageous. They actually dare to fight a first-rate sect. I'm afraid they don't want to waste time. They should quickly lose and pack their bags to go home. Just as the crowd was discussing, the disciples of the Great Development Sacred Sect had already spread out. Powerful spiritual energy instantly filled the air. Oh my God! They're all martial kings. Nonsense, this is a first-rate sect. They're only ordinary disciples. If they sent their elite disciples, the other sects wouldn't have a need to participate. When the disciples of the Great Development Sacred Sect entered battle mode and unleashed their martial king cultivation, the venue immediately entered a small climax. The projection formation was a little naughty. At this moment, the camera turned to the disciples of the sect of all times. It was as if they wanted to show the despair on their faces in front of the 25 martial kings of the Great Development Sacred Sect. It was not despair. It was endless fighting spirit. Li Qingyang, who was standing at the front, gently raised his hand. Xiao Ziji, Yi Xingchen, and the rest spread out and locked on to one of the disciples of the Great Development Sacred Sect. Some of them were smiling, and some of them were showing disdain. The battle begins. At this moment, the referee shouted loudly, "Go!" The disciple of the Great Development Sacred Sect shouted. However, as soon as he finished speaking, a gust of wind blew. Su Xiaoma instantly approached and swept his right leg that was filled with spiritual energy. Boom, thump, thump, thump. The disciple of the Great Development Sacred Sect staggered backward with his hands crossed. His eyes were filled with astonishment. Stomp! Su Xiaoma strode forward and leaped into the air. His footprints suddenly exploded in mid-air and pressed down like an inescapable net. Boom! 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 The violent footprints crashed down again and again. The disciple of the Great Development Sacred Sect could only activate his chi wall to resist. Although he managed to defuse it, he was forced to take more than 10 steps back. Boom! On the other side, an explosion was heard. Xiao Zuiji, whose entire body was filled with earth element spiritual energy, was bombarding his opponent. With every attack, the air was filled with an afterimage that was almost solid. The audience widened their eyes. The battle had just begun, and the two disciples of the sect of all times seemed to be as powerful as the disciples of the Great Development Sacred Sect. Boom! At this moment, an explosion was heard from the screen again. Everyone looked over and saw a disciple of the Great Development Sacred Sect had fallen at the edge of the arena. Yi Xingqian stopped in front of him and said calmly, "Trash." Boom! He kicked him. That disciple of the Great Development Holy Sect flew out and fell outside the fighting stage with a grimace on his face. Eliminated. Eliminated. Chapter 708. Perhaps because the battle between a fifth-rate sect and a first-rate sect was a hot topic, the organizers allowed the Sect of All Times and the Great Development Sacred Sect to start the first round of the Battle of Dragons and Tigers. Indeed, it was a hot topic. Because when Yi Xingqian eliminated a disciple of the Great Development Sacred Sect in the cleanest way, the entire continent was in an uproar. A martial king disciple of a first-rate sect was eliminated at the beginning of the competition. This was simply unimaginable. How is this possible? The elders of the various sects were astonished. Although the disciple sent by the Great Development Sacred Sect was not the best, he was still a martial king. If he could be defeated so quickly, then how strong was the disciple of the Sect of All Times? He is Yi Xingqian. That guy who killed his way into the Gathering of Heroes leaderboard in the shortest amount of time. That's him. No wonder he is so strong. When the cultivators recognized Yi Xingqian, the shock in their hearts lessened. In such a short time, he entered the human board and the earth board. This disciple of the Sect of All Times was definitely strong. Crack! In a corner of a city, a black-robed man saw Yi Xingqian defeating his opponent on the screen and said hatefully, "This guy has become stronger again." However, he smiled coldly and said, "During this period of time, I have also undergone tremendous changes." Yi Xingqian. Sect of All Times. Sooner or later, I will trample all of you under my feet and trample on you. Sigh. On the spectator stand, Jun Changshao shook his head and said, "It's not challenging at all." Although the disciples sent by the Great Development Sacred Sect were all martial kings, their overall strength was not even worthy of carrying his shoes. He was just that confident and arrogant. However, Duan Zishou, who was sitting beside him, had a change of expression. He originally thought that after the competition began, the disciples of the Sect of All Times would be defeated in seconds. In the end, the Great Development Sacred Sect had already lost one of their disciples. It's fine, it's fine. It's just the beginning. There are still 24 disciples left. When they fight seriously, the Sect of All Times will definitely not be able to escape. Boom. Another explosion came from the arena, interrupting Duan Zishou's train of thought. He hurriedly looked over and saw a disciple of the Great Development Sacred Sect being punched out by Xiao Ziji. Another one eliminated. Oh my god, this speed is too fast. The audience was dumbfounded. The first Great Evolution Sect disciple being eliminated could still be attributed to underestimating his opponent. However, the second disciple being eliminated was obviously because he was unable to match his opponent in terms of strength. The most tragic thing was, throughout the entire exchange, Zhang Xian had been on the defensive, unable to launch an effective counterattack before he was sent flying. Interesting, interesting. Zhao Dezhuang was still looking at Xiao Ziji. Seeing him use his toughest physical body to send his opponent flying, a strong fighting spirit immediately appeared in his eyes. Shua! Xiao Ziji retracted his hand and looked at him. Although the two of them were separated by a great distance, the exchange of glances seemed to create sparks of passion. Qingyang County. When Yi Xingqian and Xiao Ziji defeated the Grand Yen Saints disciples one after another, they had completely fallen into absolute madness. Some of the more emotional ones even pulled their clothes and shouted loudly. In the past dragon and tiger battle for supremacy, regardless of whether it was a one-on-one or a group battle, the sect disciples representing Southwest Yangzhou had always lost. Now that the first round of the competition had just begun, the Sect of All Times had eliminated two first-rate Great Development Sacred Sect disciples in a chaotic battle, no doubt breaking the record and breaking the awkwardness. Dojo Master. Elder Zhou said excitedly, the Sect of All Times has eliminated another one. Yi Tianqing, who was standing in front, did not speak, but his body was trembling violently. He was so excited that he could not control himself. Boom! Boom! In the array, the Sect of All Times disciple and the Great Development Sacred Sect disciple had already started fighting. Light flashed, and spiritual energy spread out. The audience's eyes widened as they watched. In their imagination, when a fifth-rate sect and a first-rate sect fought, they would definitely be beaten to a pulp. However, reality gave them a hard slap in the face. Not only was this fifth-rate sect disciple not beaten by a first-rate sect disciple, but he also quickly gained the upper hand. Huff, huff, Long Xiang strode forward, unleashing his mountain-collapsing earth-shattering fist. Tian Qi, Song Xianzhou, and the rest were also releasing their spiritual energy and martial arts to their heart's content. They did not care if their opponent was a first-rate sect. They only cared about being able to fight to their heart's content at this moment. Ancient Shadowless Kick. Earth-shattering fist. Crimson Sky Flame Slash. Boom! 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 The Sect of All Times disciples released their martial arts in unison, bursting into a dazzling light. As it was rare for them to encounter a strong opponent, they did not directly defeat their opponent like Yi Xingqian and Xiao Ziji. Instead, they suppressed their opponent from beginning to end so that they could fight for a while longer. Damn it! A Great Development Sacred Sect disciple shouted, "Form the array." Swoosh! Swoosh! Everyone moved closer and maintained a certain distance. Looking down from above, one could see that they had already set up a strange array. Great Spirit Amplification Illusion Array. This is a high-level combination martial arts technique. I didn't expect them to use it at the beginning of the battle. The Sect of All Times disciples are not weak either. If they don't use their full strength now, it will be difficult for them to turn the tables. While the crowd was discussing, the 20 to 30 Great Development Sacred Sect disciples released their cultivation at the same time. Then, they quickly connected with each other. In an instant, the entire fighting ring was covered by a vast amount of spiritual energy. Huff huff, all of a sudden, the spiritual energy gathered together and transformed into a gigantic Dharma idol. 6 thick and long arms extended from the Dharma idol. It's the spiritual illusion god. A Dharma idol formed by so many Great Development Sacred Sect disciples. Its strength is probably not weaker than a peak martial king, right? This is the foundation of a first-rate sect. Looking at the gigantic Dharma idol that was formed, Jun Changshao said with interest, "This is getting interesting." Getting interesting? Duan Zishou said coldly, "Jun Patriarch, I'm afraid you don't know that the power of this combination martial arts technique is extremely terrifying." I can see that, Jun Changshao said. Judging from the aura of the Dharma idol, it was probably not weaker than a peak martial king. However, so what? In the life and death secret realm, my disciples used spirit beasts comparable to Wu Huang to practice. A mere peak martial king was not enough. Huff huff, the spiritual illusion god suddenly waved his 2 large hands and smashed them down on the Sect of All Times disciples. The power of the attack instantly stirred up the space, causing it to gradually distort. Under the pressure of the large hands, the sky darkened. The Sect of All Times disciples who were gathered together were indifferent. Even the corners of their mouths were raised in disdain. Why don't they dodge? Ta! Xiao Ziji took a step forward and stood behind his fellow disciples. Then, he suddenly opened his arms and dense earth element spiritual energy gathered between his palms. From the light screen, this man was like an indestructible wall. Huff huff, the spiritual illusion god's 2 large hands suddenly pressed down. Xiao Ziji's clothes were torn. Earth element spiritual energy burst out from every inch of his solid muscles and turned into 2 large hands, directly grabbing the large hands that pressed down. Why didn't his pants break? Go ask Kakarot. Ka ka ka. After catching the 2 heavy hands, the floor under Xiao Ziji's feet instantly shattered. The audience all opened their mouths. Rise! At this moment, Xiao Ziji's veins popped out. He suddenly exerted strength in his arms. Huff huff, the spiritual illusion god was directly lifted up. The 23 Saint Sun disciples who were responsible for supporting him could not help but take a step forward. Their eyes were immediately filled with shock. The Dharma idol formed by so many of us was actually pulled away by him alone. Just how strong was his physical strength? Ah! Xiao Zuiji, who had exposed his upper body, roared angrily. The power in his arms exploded wildly, and Spirit Illusion Elder was directly pulled up. Then, it drew a beautiful arc in the air and fell heavily onto the other side of the fighting ring. Chapter 709. Boom! The Spirit Illusion Elder was lifted off the ground and fell to the ground. The martial artists who were watching this scene through the projection array all stared with their eyes wide open. The audience in the venue could directly see it, so their mouths were open enough to stuff a few eggs in. If it was a shoulder throw, it would still be understandable. But the Spirit Illusion Elder was a manifestation of spiritual energy, not a physical beast. That Sect of all times disciple actually lifted it up with his bare hands and then fell to the ground. This was too shocking. Moreover, it was formed by 23 martial kings. It was too explosive, too terrifying. Whoosh whoosh. A powerful aura spread out from the stage. Xiao Ziji exposed his upper body, his back facing the projection array, and explained to all the martial artists in the continent what it meant to have the strength to lift mountains. At that moment, the spectating martial artists only had 2 words for this Sect of all times disciple who had an explosive physical body. Awesome! In the distant Lily Sacred Sect. After Xiao Zui used his own strength to pull up the mountain and destroy the Dharma idol formed by the 23 martial kings, the entire sect fell into silence. The Lily Sacred Sect had originally signed up to participate in the Dragon-Tiger battle. Later, one of their most outstanding disciples was defeated by Xiao Ziji. They had lost a lot of face and could only apply for cancellation. Master! Murong Xian stood at the back of the mountain and looked at the man's back on the screen. She said bitterly, when he came to fight, he did not use his full strength, yes. At that time, Xiao Ziji did not use his full strength. He came to the Lily Sacred Sect to regain the dignity that he had lost, that was all. Cheng Huixin's eyes flashed with anger. She originally thought that her disciple could continue to cultivate and surpass Xiao Ziji, but now, from that guy's strength, the gap between the two was getting bigger and bigger. Damn it! Cheng Huixin was very unwilling. However, she had to accept the fact that the disciples of the Sect of all times were getting stronger and stronger. Senior Brother Xiao, mighty. Senior Brother Xiao, mighty. Iron Bone Mountain. When Xiao Ziji fell to the Spirit Illusion Elder, more than 10,000 disciples cheered in unison. Ha ha ha. Lu Wanshi held the spoon and danced with joy. The pitiful 1 Black and 2 Black stood in front of the stove, their faces covered with leaves. Once again, he returned to the stage. After Xiao Ziji threw Ling Huanzun to the ground, the Great Development Sacred Sect's disciples could not control their bodies and staggered forward. When they steadied themselves and looked at the disciple of the Sect of all times, their eyes were filled with fear. This man was too terrifying. Form the formation. A disciple of the Great Development Sacred Sect shouted angrily. Shwa! Shwa! More than 20 people adjusted their positions and activated their spiritual energy to the maximum. The Illusion Senior, who had fallen to the ground, stood up again. Shwa! 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 8 arms swung, carrying the force of 10,000 caddies as they blasted toward Xiao Ziji. They were very angry. His Dharma idol was also stimulated to the extreme. Ka ka ka! Xiao Ziji, whose back was facing the Spirit Illusion Elder, was covered in light as a solid black armor instantly formed. Huff huff! At this moment, Spirit Illusion Elder's fist smashed down, and the power it carried instantly caused the ground to crack. Boom! Yang Yuhua rushed over and stood in front of Senior Brother Xiao. She stretched out her palms and directly caught the heavy fist. Ka ka ka! At the same time, streams of light surrounded her arms and spread to her entire body. When the light dissipated, a solid armor was already on her body. The process of Xiao Ziji and Yang Yuhua activating their spirit armor could only be described as handsome. The calmness they displayed throughout the process could only be described as pretentious. In Jun Changxiao's words, since they were participating in the Dragon-Tiger battle, they were here to show off. In this world, no one could stop the disciples of the sect of all times from showing off. If there was, then let them die. Huff! Huff! The other 7 arms pressed down fiercely. Suddenly, a bone-chilling cold spread from afar, and layers of frost covered the big hands. Ice seal! Lu Qianqian crossed her jade-like hands and shouted coldly. Ka ka ka, the 7 arms pressing down were instantly frozen, and the falling speed was greatly reduced. It's sealed! The spectators exclaimed. This girl's understanding of the ice element is terrifying. An ice elementalist said in a deep voice. Boom! A fist hit the arm that Yang Yuhua had caught and directly smashed it into pieces. Then, He Wudi floated down and said, "Leave it to me." Shwa! Shwa! Xiao Ziji and Yang Yuhua dodged. He Wudi stood under the frozen arm and shook it. His slightly lazy gaze instantly turned sharp. You're serious now? Jun Changxiao asked. This last disciple's cultivation had improved very quickly, but he had never seen how strong his combat power was. Shwa! He Wudi's spiritual energy gathered in his right fist and immediately used landslide fist. Huff huff! Huff huff! For a moment the entire arena was filled with terrifying fist aura. Yi Xingchen frowned. He had been cultivating landslide fist, but in terms of power and momentum, it was obviously far from He Wudi's. Although Night Emperor was a reborn martial emperor, this last disciple was from the upper realm. In the battle at the evil Black Dragon sect, if not for the demonic aura entering his body due to carelessness, the group of evil faction experts who used bloodthirsty technique would not have been enough for him. In this Dragon-Tiger competition, all the disciples of the sect of all times had cheats. He Wudi was flying in the sky and looked at all the cheats. Boom! 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 Before the seals on the 7 arms could be unlocked, numerous fist imprints were already flying towards him. Bang! 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 After a series of explosions, the illusion elder's arms were all broken. His spiritual energy turned into smoke and covered half of the arena. Shwa! He Wudi jumped up and stretched out 2 fingers. Huff huff, crimson light quickly gathered and shot out a dazzling light beam. It blasted between the eyebrows of the tottering illusion elder and penetrated it. Pooh! Pooh! The disciples of the Great Development Sacred Sect spat out blood. As their minds were in a mess, the condensed illusion elder dissipated on the arena. It's broken! Everyone's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Xiao Zuiji's tossing of spirit illusion elder was already valiant enough, but that disciple actually killed him so easily. Jun Changxiao touched his chin and said, "My last disciple should be as strong as a peak martial king. If I had known, I would not have brought him to the Dragon-Tiger competition." Why? Because he was too strong. He did not give the other participants any chance to survive. Don't waste time. Lu Qianqian, who had been silent, said, "End the battle quickly." Li Qingyang and the others did not dare to disobey eldest senior sister's order. Shwa! Shwa! Therefore, they did not care about the injuries of the Great Development Sacred Sect disciple. They gathered all kinds of skills and attacked. Yi Xingchen was the most active one. After all, he had been called trash before the battle started. He would definitely vent his anger on the other participants. Plop! Plop! The injured disciples of the Great Development Sacred Sect could not withstand the attacks of the disciples of the Sect of all times. They flew out of the arena one by one. This! The audience was dumbfounded. After a while, there was only one disciple of the Great Development Sacred Sect left on the arena. The 25 disciples of the sect of all time standing in front of him were either leaning to the side, hugging their hands, or squatting down. They were emitting a strong aura as if they had turned into monsters. Ah! The disciple of the Great Development Sacred Sect shouted angrily. In the end, before he could even make a move, he was sent flying by Su Xiaomo's kick and landed neatly with his family. At this moment, the first battle of the first round had ended. After a long pause, the referee said, "The Great Development Sacred Sect has been eliminated. The winner is the Sect of all times." Ding! Congratulations to the host for completing the side mission. You have received Experience Talisman X2. It has been transferred to the spatial ring. A notification sounded in his ears. However, Jun Changshao was shocked and said, "What about the contribution points?" The system said, "This kind of side mission with a price tag will not give contribution points as a reward." Fuck! Jun Changshao broke down and said, "Are you kidding me?" Chapter 710. The first battle of the first round had ended. All 25 disciples of the Great Development Sacred Sect were sent flying. None of the disciples of the Sect of all times were eliminated. The entire Falling Star continent fell into absolute silence after the referee made the announcement. In the beginning, everyone thought that the Sect of all times would help the Great Development Sacred Sect advance effortlessly. In the beginning, no one was optimistic about this fifth-rate sect. Even the citizens of the Azure Sun County cheered for them, hoping that they could withstand the attacks of a first-rate sect. In the end, the Great Development Sacred Sect was defeated and became the stepping stone of the Sect of all times, helping them advance to the second round. Actually, they shouldn't have shouted for the Sect of all times to hold on. They should have shouted for the Great Development Sacred Sect to hold on. Unfortunately, they didn't hold on. Even with the Great Spirit Amplification Illusion Array, they were still mercilessly crushed by the disciples of the Sect of all times. This was the story of a river of sorrow. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the screen. They were fixed on the group of disciples of the Sect of all times who were standing irregularly on the stage. Some were leaning to the side, some were cupping their hands, and some were clenching their fists. Deep fear rose in their eyes. Monsters! Come and see, a group of monsters! Duan Zisho had the richest expression on his face. The Great Development Saint's disciples were all defeated. He even subconsciously rubbed his eyes to confirm if what he saw was real. It was real and effective. A first-rate sect that even his own disciples would go all out against, lost to the Sect of all times just like that. It was unimaginable and unbelievable. Hey! Jun Changshao, who was sitting at the side, leaned back in his chair and supported the back of his head with both hands. He smiled and said, "I hope your sect can pass the first round. This way, we might still have a chance to meet." Duan Zisho's mouth twitched violently. Before the battle, he couldn't wait to meet the Sect of all times. However, now that the first-rate sect was defeated, he would definitely be unlucky to meet them in the second round. The elders of the various sects who were originally regretting that they weren't matched with this fifth-rate sect were now incomparably glad that they weren't matched in the first round. Therefore, all contempt and mockery could only be crushed by absolute strength. The Sect of all times defeated the Great Development Sacred Sect and undoubtedly used their actions to prove themselves to the world. Plop! In the certification center in southwest Yangzhou, Yi Tianqing collapsed on the chair that Elder Zhou had prepared for him like a deflated balloon. His breathing was rapid, and his fingers were trembling violently. No one knew that when the Grand Development Sacred Ancestors were sent flying one by one, the dojo master's expression was very rich. When the competition was over, when the dust settled, only then did her little heart, which had been hanging in her throat, return to its original state, and she seemed to have collapsed. This meant that when a person was in a highly tense situation, they would expend a lot of energy. Even if it was a martial artist with a high realm, it would be hard to avoid this. Hall Master, Elder Zhou held onto the chair and said excitedly, "We won. The Sect of all times won, we won, we won." Yi Tianxing, who was leaning on the chair, murmured softly. Then, he could no longer control his emotions, and tears streamed down his face. In the past Dragon Tiger battle for supremacy, the sects that were sent out were all eliminated in the first round. This time, the Sect of all times had finally broken the curse and advanced to the second round. How could he not cry tears of joy? Furthermore, the sect that represented Southwest Yangzhou had even created 2 new records. First, a fifth-rate sect had advanced to the second round. Second, a first-rate sect had been eliminated in the first round. In the past Dragon Tiger battle for supremacy, although the fifth-rate sects had occasionally participated, they had all been eliminated in the first round. After a long time, the fifth-rate sects no longer dared to participate. As for the first-rate sects that participated in each competition, they had never been eliminated in the second round, let alone in the first round. Today, the Sect of all times had defeated the Grand Development Sacred Sect. The legend of the first-rate sects being undefeated in the first round was completely broken. No wonder the entire Falling Star continent fell into silence after the judges announced the results. This was because the 2 records that this sect had created were truly unprecedented. They won. The Sect of all times won. After a short moment of silence, the tens of millions of citizens of Azure Sun County cheered excitedly. Many of them were so excited that their eyes were blurred with tears. Southwest Yangzhou is the weakest prefecture, and there is only 1 spot in each Dragon Tiger battle for supremacy. If we go, we will only be a stepping stone for the other sects to advance to the second round. Azure Sun County is only a 9th-grade sect, and we are not in the eyes of the martial artists from the high-grade counties. It's okay. We have the Sect of all times. He represented Southwest Yangzhou and Azure Sun County. It was enough for him to defeat a godlike first-rate sect. Tens of millions of martial artists and citizens looked at the scattered disciples of the Sect of all times on the screen. Their backs were straightened like never before, and their faces were filled with ecstasy and pride. The Sect of all times is mighty. The Sect of all times is mighty. The angry shouts tore through the sky of Azure Sun County and spread even further. In the opposite direction. In Iron Bone Mountain, in the Sect of all times. Although the disciples were happy, they did not appear to be that crazy because it was normal for their senior brother to defeat a first-rate sect disciple. Very strong. How did they cultivate? If we encounter them, there will be a fierce battle. The participating disciples of the various sects who had yet to enter the arena stared solemnly at the disciples of the Sect of all times who were walking down from the arena. Defeating the Grand Development Sacred Sect had already attracted the attention of these sect geniuses. Everyone. Suddenly, a voice came from above. Everyone looked up and saw Jun Changshao appear in front of the array again. He said to the camera, "These are my disciples. If you join the Sect of all times, you will be as strong as them." Everyone's mouth twitched. What are you waiting for? Action is better than excitement. His voice cracked when he shouted the last few words. It was mainly because he was too far away from the array and had to shout loudly. Swoosh! Swoosh! 2 of the organizers, Wu Huang, grabbed Jun Changshao and pressed him to the seat. They did not leave and stood in front of him with their arms crossed. This treatment was very good. I say, the 2 of you. Jun Changshao broke down. There are so many people here. Don't keep staring at me. The elders of the various sects twitched their mouths. If they did not keep an eye on you, you would fly up to advertise. Who the hell could stand this? The first battle of the first round ended. Under everyone's gaze, Lu Qianxian, Li Qingyang, and the others returned to their seats. Senior brother. Li Fei muttered, they are too weak. Li Qingyang said, the first-rate sects only sent their disciples to participate in the Dragon Tiger battle for hegemony. If they really fought for real and sent out their most elite disciples, we might not win so easily. With his steady personality, he would not deny the strength of the first-rate sects just because he defeated the Great Development Sacred Sect. After all, such forces with a strong foundation had many heaven-defying existences. To put it bluntly, in the eyes of the first-rate sects, the dragon-tiger battle for hegemony was nothing more than sending disciples to train their troops. Those most elite disciples would definitely put their thoughts on cultivation. I hope that the opponents in the next round will be stronger, Su Xiaoma said. Li Qingyang said, the patriarch said that in this dragon-tiger battle for hegemony, there are many strong geniuses. Next, we can take the opportunity to see them. Yes. Everyone focused on the sects that were about to appear. Unfortunately, the second round was fought by two fourth-rate sects, and they were not from the central region. Both sides chose to fight one-on-one. There was no excitement in watching the matches. So boring. Su Xiaoma and Li Fei were sleepy. It was only when the second-rate world-defying sacred sect fought with a third-rate sect that they became interested. Because after the two sides chose to fight one-on-one, the guy called Ao Wushuang defeated 25 people by himself. Tsk tisk. Su Xiaoma said, a bit strong. He's a strong opponent. Li Qingyang said. Shua. After the referee announced the result, Ao Wushuang jumped down from the stage. When he returned to his original position, he swept his gaze across the disciples of the sect of all times and said disdainfully, trash. Yi Xingqian's gaze gradually became cold, and said, the next round must be against the world-defying sacred sect, I want to crush him to death. Chapter 7:11. The competition continued. As expected, the high-level sects, especially the four first-rate sects, easily defeated their opponents and advanced to the second round. Of course. There were also low-level sects that defeated high-level sections. For example, the Iron Fist sect. This third-rate sect defeated a third-rate sect from the middle state and advanced to the second round. Although Zhao Dezhuang had only fought one match, his overwhelming cultivation made the audience believe that this kid's strength was definitely extraordinary. There are indeed many good geniuses in this dragon and tiger battle for supremacy. Many experts began to discuss among themselves. However, when they inadvertently looked at the disciples of the sect of all times and thought of the scene of them beating up the disciples of the first-rate sects, they secretly said, the disciples sent by the sect of all times are all monsters. You are Xiao Ziji. Zhao Dezhuang, who had just walked down, stopped outside the waiting area of the sect of all times. That's right, Xiao Ziji said. Zhao Dezhuang grinned and said, I hope we can meet in the next round. He was very excited when he defeated Spirit Illusion Elder with the strength to pick up a mountain. He also realized that his opponent's physical body was definitely very strong. His master was right. This disciple of the sect of all times was a very good opponent. If he could fight around, it would be worth the trip. I think so too, Xiao Ziji said. Meeting in the wild and walking with large strides while carrying a spirit beast, he had the urge to spar. Boom! After the final two sects emerged victorious, the first round of the dragon and tiger battle for supremacy came to an end. The 200 sects had fought 100 rounds, so the sky was dark after all the matches were over. Everyone. City Lord Han said loudly, the first round of the dragon and tiger battle for supremacy has ended. Please pay attention to the second round tomorrow. It was so satisfying. Especially the sect of all times. I didn't expect them to be the biggest upset and defeat the first-rate Grand Evolution Sacred Sect. The audience left the venue one after another, but they were still discussing the duel between the sects on the way back. Jun Changshao also stood up. However, after taking 2 steps, the two Wu Huang followed him. He was afraid that Zhang Xian would fly up and shamelessly advertise for the sect. Thus, he had to follow him closely. Buzz! All of a sudden, the projection array turned dark. After making sure that the formation has been closed, the two Wu Huang men finally feel relieved and leave. The two brothers stared at Jun Patriarch for half a day and were quite tired, so they found a restaurant to sit down and ordered a few dishes and 2 pots of wine to relax. Let's go, let's go. After the cultivators of the various provinces and cities saw the light curtain dimming, they got up and left one after another, secretly deciding to come early tomorrow to occupy a better position to watch the battle. Buzz! However, before they could leave, the dimmed light screen of the formation lit up again. Jun Changxiao's handsome face appeared once again. He stroked his hair and said with a smile, "Everyone, Hu Changxiao, am back." All the martial artists on the continent were petrified. Pooh! When the two Wu Huang from the organizers saw that the projection array was suddenly activated and that Shameless Guy appeared on the screen again, they spat out their wine on the spot and the chopsticks in their hands fell to the ground. Wasn't the formation turned off? Why did it turn on again? The two of them didn't have time to think about it and hurriedly flew out of the window. Then, they approached Jun Changxiao, who was promoting his sect with great emotion. They each grabbed one of his arms and pulled him back, shouting, "Quickly close the array." Several formation masters below were sweating profusely and communicating with the projection array. In the end, it took them a long time to turn it off again. He dared to hijack the formation just to advertise. Jun Patriarch. You're truly a lunatic. However, it also sounded the alarm for the organizer. They hurriedly sent dozens of formation masters overnight to reinforce the projection array and build a firewall to prevent it from being hacked again. More than that. In order to prevent that shameless guy from interfering with the competition again and forcefully advertising, City Lord Han sent several Wu Huang men. The next day, Jun Changxiao was just sitting in the spectator seat. Swish! 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 10 burly brothers quickly surrounded him. Jun Changxiao's mouth twitched and said, "Excuse me, I want to go to the toilet." "We'll go with you." The 10 Wu Huang men shouted in unison. The mission given by City Lord Han was very simple. They must keep an eye on this guy and must not let him take the opportunity to fly into the projection array. Okay. Jun Changxiao leaned on the chair and said, "I can still hold on for a while." Buzz! The projection array started again. On the screen, the 100 sects that had advanced to the second round entered one after another, leading to loud cheers. When the disciples of the sect of all times appeared, many of the audience members shouted again. Yesterday's unexpected defeat of a first-rate sect made them recognize this fifth-rate sect. They were willing to be fans and cheer for them. The sects were in position. City Lord Han did not waste any time and went straight to the point, asking the disciples to draw lots to choose their opponents for the second round. "Please don't draw the sect of all times, please don't draw the sect of all times." A disciple representative walked up to the stage, stood in front of the box, and muttered silently. Yesterday, he still wanted to draw it, but today, he did not want to draw it. This kind of psychological change was quite big. Schwa! He reached in and took it out. The sect shown on the sign was not the sect of all times, which made the disciple let out a long sigh of relief. "Senior sister, you go." "Okay." Li Qingyang walked over again. After drawing lots, he was able to face it calmly. However, the disciples of the other sects were nervous and worried. They prayed in their hearts, "Please don't draw their own sects." Schwa! Li Qingyang raised his hand and stopped. Sect of all time's second round opponent is City Lord Han probably knew that this new sect was very popular, so he deliberately dragged out his voice before announcing, "Golden Brilliance Holy Sect." Not bad, not bad. The sects that were not selected immediately let out a long sigh of relief. However, Duan Zishou, who was sitting in the VIP spectator seats, was stunned. There were so many sections. Why was it his own sect? For this matter, the eliminated Grand Development Holy Sect was also thinking about it. There were so many sects, but why was it the first to be drawn? "Brother." Jun Changxiao looked through the small gap left by Wu Huang and grinned, "It's finally as you wish." Duan Zishou's mouth twitched. Of course, he could not be pessimistic. Instead, he straightened his back and sneered, "Meeting my Golden Brilliance Holy Sect, your sect of all time's Dark Horse Road ends here." "Is that so?" Jun Changxiao touched his chin. "Gotcha! Gotcha!" The round of drawing opponents continued, but in the area where the sect of all times was, there was already the sound of bones cracking. Su Xiaoma shook his head and rotated his wrist. There was a sinister smile on his face. Li Fei, Tian Qi, and the others were also warming up before the battle. The patriarch's repeated instructions from last night rang in their ears: if you meet Golden Brilliant's holy sect, beat them to death. Key words. Beat them to death. City Lord Han fully considered the topic. After the drawing ceremony was over, he announced loudly, the first battle of the second round, Sect of All Times versus Golden Brilliant's holy sect. Shwa! Li Qingyang got up and waved his sleeves, let's go. Shwa! 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 Xiao Ziji, Su Xiaoma, and the others clenched their fists and then stepped onto the martial arts field. Hoo-hoo, they stood on the stage and looked at the Golden Brilliant's holy sect disciples who were walking over. They released a powerful aura. It was as if their whole body turned black in an instant, and their eyes flashed with a sinister red light. Duan Zishou's heart suddenly thumped. Their eyes are so scary. The audience felt their hair stand on end as they watched. Those Golden Brilliant's holy sect disciples who were walking over were also frightened. At this moment, it was most appropriate to describe them as panicking holy sect. Chapter 7:12. When the disciples of the Sect of All Times stood on the stage, it was as if they had turned into demons from hell, exuding an extremely gloomy gaze. The disciples of the Golden Brilliant's holy sect panicked. This kind of terrifying gaze was too frightening. This is troublesome. Duan Zishou's face was extremely ugly. From the expressions of the disciples of the Sect of All Times, he guessed that once the fight started, it would definitely be stronger than yesterday. This elder could still muster up the courage to speak ruthlessly to Jun Changshao, but now he was terrified. He only hoped that after the fight started, the disciples would be easily defeated. Easily defeated? He had underestimated Jun Changshao's tolerance. Swish! Swish! The disciples of the Golden Brilliant's holy sect stood on the stage with difficulty. Compared to the disciples of the Sect of All Times, they seemed to be much weaker. The atmosphere is not right. The disciples of the Sect of All Times seemed to hate the Golden Brilliant's holy sect. Everyone could see that something was wrong. At this moment, the referee stepped onto the stage and asked, representatives of both sides, do you want to fight one-on-one or in a chaotic battle? One-on-one, Li Qingyang said. Since the patriarch had already given the order, he would definitely torture them one by one. Qingyang. You've changed. The referee asked the representative of the Golden Brilliant's holy sect and then announced loudly, the first battle of the second round of the Dragon Tiger battle for supremacy will be one-on-one. The first participant, please come forward. I'll go first. Yi Xingqian strode out and stood in the middle of the stage, his eyes flashing coldly. Junior Sunday, a disciple of the Golden Brilliant's holy sect said, you're up. Junior Sun's mouth twitched slightly, but he could only bite the bullet and walk up. Let the battle begin. The referee announced loudly. However, just as he finished speaking, Yi Xingqian appeared in front of the disciple of the Golden Brilliant's holy sect with cloud steps, his right hand whistling with a strong wind. Bang! This palm directly hit the opponent's face, causing him to fall to the ground with his teeth scattered all over the ground. Swish! Yi Xingqian strode forward, grabbed the guy's right leg and fiercely threw him to the other side. Boom! 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 The arena shook, and the audience's mouths twitched. They couldn't even bear to look at the disciple of Jinhuang holy sect who was being thrown around. Too cruel, too brutal. Ao Wushuang's arrogance yesterday made the Night Emperor very angry. Therefore, even without the Patriarch's order, he would still give his opponent a good beating. Duan Zishou closed his eyes. Although he had a premonition that his disciple would suffer a calamity, he did not expect that he would be abused so miserably. Stop, stop, stop. The referee hurriedly stepped onto the stage to stop him. Contestant, Dragon and Tiger battle for hegemony is nothing more than an exchange of pointers, not a battle of life and death. Please control your emotions and don't be so cruel. Even the referee was alarmed. It could be seen how terrifying Night Emperor was when he tortured people. Humph! Yi Xingqian stopped and casually threw the disciple of Jin Huang Holy Sect out of the arena. The humanized projection array even gave that guy a close-up shot. Many children were so scared that they hurriedly closed their eyes. Too tragic. Just how great is this hatred? Junior brother Yi. The corner of Li Qingyang's mouth twitched slightly as he transmitted his voice. You're a bit too heavy-handed. The patriarch said to torture him to death. Yi Xingqian did not retreat. Instead, he looked at the angry disciples of Jin Huang Holy Sect and said faintly, "Send someone to continue the battle." It was not enough to torture one person. He wanted to torture a few more. "I'll do it." A disciple of Jin Huang Holy Sect took the initiative to walk out. His eyes flashed with monstrous anger. Although he was very afraid of this guy, his fellow disciple was being tortured like a ghost. Any man with a bit of courage could not bear it. Begin. The referee shouted. Boom! 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 Stop, stop, stop. It had just begun and the referee could not stand it anymore. He went onto the stage to continue to stop Yi Xingqian. There was no other way. If he did not hurry up to dissuade him, it would be easy for him to lose his life. This old man was destined to be the busiest referee today. Because after defeating the second opponent, Night Emperor still chose to continue the battle. Every time the battle began, he would be merciless. Begin. Stop, stop, stop. Begin. Stop, stop, stop. After a few more battles, the referee went up and down to dissuade him. He was so tired that he was sweating profusely. I said, "Can't you guys replace that violent maniac so that my old bones can safely preside over this sect battle?" In a certain city, Yi Xingqian violently abused the disciples of Jin Huang Holy Sect again and again. The black-robed man leaning against the corner of the wall clenched his fists tightly. He was very familiar with these scenes. He had been involved, so he understood the pain of being abused very well. Some scars could be healed, but some scars would turn into scars, deeply imprinted on the skin and deeply imprinted in the heart. Kacha! The black-robed man clenched his fists tightly and gritted his teeth. Yi Xingqian, if I, Dai Lu, don't trample you under my feet, I swear I am not a human. It turned out that he was our lovely brother Green Scarf. No wonder he hated Yi Xingqian so much. After all, he had been abused more than once. Of course. Dai Lu also realized that although he had the devouring power and could quickly improve his cultivation, in terms of strength, he was still inferior to that guy. It didn't matter. The path of martial arts had just begun. When I could use my ability freely and break through to a higher level, I would definitely be able to trample that guy under my feet and take back the humiliation I had suffered. Brother Green Scarf's spirit of never being discouraged despite repeated defeats is worth learning. The sad thing was, even if he had the devouring power, how could he compete with Yi Xingqian, who had been reborn as a martial emperor and was cultivating in the sect of all times? You just added a layer of buff. That guy added 2 layers of buff. There was no way to win at all. It was simply giving away the last time. It didn't matter, it didn't matter. Dai Lu took out a yellowed map, his eyes flashing with green light. As long as I can find the treasure inside, I will definitely be able to improve to a higher level. This was undoubtedly what he had obtained from the stall. His intuition told him that there must be a hidden great opportunity. Boss. At a stall in a certain city, a youth picked up the same yellowed map as Dai Lu's and said, "How much do you want to buy this?" "Young man," the stall owner said in a meaningful tone, "your eyes are very unique. This map is my family's heirloom. It is said that there is a great secret hidden in it, and only those who are fated can see it. Since you have taken a fancy to it, then it is fate. 10 taels of silver, take it." "Okay, deal." The inexperienced youth handed over 10 taels of silver and left with the map in his hand. The old man took the money and said to himself, "I cheated another one. Phew. Dai Lu retracted his gaze from the screen and followed the route on the yellowed map. He could already foresee the scene of him finding the treasure and obtaining the opportunity, trampling on Yixingchen, and punching the Sect of all times. Back at the Dragon Tiger battle for supremacy. When Yixingchen defeated the 10th disciple, Li Qingyang stopped him and let Su Xiaoma fight. The main reason was that he was too fierce. He was afraid that he would lose control and kill someone. Seeing that the violent maniac was replaced, the referee let out a sigh of relief and shouted, "Begin." Boom! 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 Stop, stop, stop! Su Xiaoma had just started to abuse when the referee jumped up to stop him. He said with a face full of despair, "Is there any normal person in the Sect of all times?" Plop! Plop! The 25 battles ended. The disciples of the Golden Brilliance Holy Sect were beaten by the disciples of the Sect of all times until they were paralyzed on the ground like mud. "Brother," Jun Changshao said, "thank you for letting me win." Duan Zishou powerlessly slumped on his seat. He brought his disciples to participate in the Dragon Tiger battle for supremacy for the sake of ranking. In the end, he was eliminated in the second round, and he was beaten so miserably. The 10 brothers surrounding Sect Master Jun tensed up. Because, according to that guy's character, he might just suddenly rush towards the projection array and advertise for them. Watch him. Watch him closely. Chapter 713. Not only did Golden Brilliance Holy Sect lose, but their disciples were also ruthlessly beaten up. From the way they were carried down, it wasn't hard to tell that they had suffered both physical and mental injuries. How pitiful! Sect of all times disciples are too ruthless. The audience discussed, and at the same time, they also understood the cruel side of Sect of all times. Those participating Sect disciples couldn't help but feel nervous. They were worried that if they continued, would they also be beaten up badly in the next round? Don't worry. As long as they weren't remembered, they would be safe. Except for the second-rate world-defying Holy Sect. Because of Ao Wushuang's arrogance, even if Jun Changshao didn't care, Yixingchen, who was more narrow-minded, had already remembered it in his heart. Trash. Knight Emperor looked at the arrogant guy opposite him and secretly said, "Don't get eliminated." Ao Wushuang looked over with a disdainful smile. Although this Sect of all times disciples' performance was very good, in his eyes, they were just vulgar trash. Golden Brilliance Holy Sect is eliminated. Winner Sect of all times. The referee's weak voice sounded in the venue and transmitted through the screen to all the cities in the continent. Why was he weak? Wasn't it because he frequently came up to stop them? They won again. Sect of all times won again. When the referee's voice reverberated in Azure Sun County, all the cities once again fell into a frenzy. Yi Tianqing sat on the chair again, and his expression changed from dull to ecstatic. In the end, he covered his face with both hands, and his body trembled violently. It was unknown whether he was laughing or crying. They broke the curse and entered the second round, and now they entered the third round. This newly promoted fifth-rate sect had been creating new records that belonged to the Southwest Yangzhou sect. Proud, proud. Mu Changhong, who was in the city lord's mansion, was also full of smiles. The Sect of all times' performance had far exceeded his expectations. At this moment, it was the best opportunity to advertise. However, Jun Changshao could only sit there obediently because the 10 brothers beside him were staring at him. There was no way out for him at all. Aya! He held his stomach and said, "My stomach hurts, here." One of the brothers threw a wooden bucket over and said indifferently, "Put it inside." The corner of Jun Changshao's mouth twitched. Then, he pointed to the sky and exclaimed, "Look, a gray plane." The 10 brothers remained indifferent and continued to stare at him with their eyes wide open. "All right." Jun Changshao gave up. He leaned against the chair and closed his eyes to rest. At the same time, he continued to release his spiritual thoughts to penetrate the projection array, but he ran into a wall again and again. The organizer had done a perfect job of preventing fire, theft, and Changshao. The second round of the competition was still going on. The various sects and clans went up the stage one after another, displaying all their martial arts skills and fighting brilliantly. After the disciples of the Sect of all times returned to their positions, they would also choose to watch the battle. For example, Xiao Ziji's attention was on Zhao Dazhuang. When Zhao Dazhuang appeared, he would naturally pay close attention. Shua! Shua! On the battle stage, sword light flashed. Clang. After a while, the Spirit Sword Sect disciple casually sheathed his sword. The clothes of the participants standing beside him were cut by the sword, but their skin was not injured. What a fast sword! As expected of a sword genius who has comprehended the fast realm. This Spirit Sword Sect also has a lot of potential. Hearing the discussion of the elders nearby, Jun Changshao touched his chin and said, "That guy is Jian Feiyan." From the information given by Tang Ren, this person had a lot of experience. Mainly because he was a sword cultivator and had comprehended a sword realm, his strength was the most difficult to determine. Zhou Hong should be very concerned, right? Sure enough, when Jun Changshao looked at his disciple, he saw that he was staring at Jian Feiyan, his eyes flashing with a strong desire to fight. Some people would ask, dragons and tigers can use weapons? Yes, as long as both sides agreed, the battle would be changed from hand-to-hand combat to armed combat. The competition continued. Next up was the world-defying Sacred Sect. Ao Wushuang once again defeated all his opponents by himself, displaying an extremely powerful combat strength. He could be so arrogant because he had the capital. Shua! After Ao Wushuang stepped down from the stage, he stopped in the waiting area of the Sect of all times and gave Yixingchen a thumbs down provocatively. Li Qingyang and the others' mouths twitched. In the sect, Yixingchen's temper was the most violent. This guy kept provoking him, which was equivalent to crazily testing the line between life and death. Senior brother. Li Fei whispered, "I bet that if junior brother Yi meets that guy, he can beat him up until he can't get out of bed for half a year." "Half a year is too short." Tian Qi said, "In my opinion, he'll be bedridden for at least 2 or 3 years. No. Su Xiaoma said seriously, with junior brother Ye's personality, that guy will probably die on the stage. Ah. Li Fei and Tian Qi were startled. If someone died, it would be a big deal. Li Qingyang was also worried about this, so he hurriedly transmitted his voice, "Junior brother Yi, if you really meet this person, you must control your emotions. You must not do anything extreme." Yixingchen said with a cold gaze, "Do I look like someone who would mess around?" Whoosh whoosh. Killing intent filled the air. Li Qingyang and the others' mouths twitched, and they all said in their hearts, "Yes." After half a day of competition, the second round ended. The 4 first-rate sects continued to be strong and smoothly advanced to the third round. The fourth-rate sects from other states were all wiped out, and the ones left on the stage were at least third-rate sections. Of course. Sect of all times was an exception. This fifth-rate sect was able to advance to the third round, which caused less shock than yesterday. After all, they stepped on a first-rate sect to advance in the first round, so it was normal for them to defeat a second-rate sect. There are still 50 sects left. I wonder what level of opponent the Sect of all times will draw tomorrow. Looking at their performance in the previous 2 rounds, unless they draw another first-rate sect, it will be difficult for the second-rate and third-rate sects to stop this big dark horse from advancing. Iron Fist Sect and Spirit Sword Sect are very strong, especially Zhao Dazhuang and Jian Feiyan. They may not be unqualified to fight the Sect of all times. Although many disciples participated in the dragon and tiger battle for supremacy, if there was a very strong existence, they could completely turn the situation around with their own strength. For example, last year's finals. A second-rate sect against a first-rate sect. Although their overall strength was not as good, and they had lost many matches in a row, when their core disciples fought, they won 13 matches in a row, directly locking in the victory and becoming the champion. This was a classic example of heroism. Although it was the opposite of the purpose of the dragon and tiger battle for supremacy, there would always be one person who would lead the sect forward. Iron Fist Sect's Xiao Dazhuang and Spirit Sword Sect's Jian Feiyun, in the eyes of many powerhouses, undoubtedly had the ability to turn the situation around by themselves. Therefore, many first-rate and second-rate sects did not dare to underestimate the two third-rate sections. If they met in the next round, they would definitely go all out. Of course. They were even more afraid of the sect of all times. Because after the two matches, there seemed to be more than one disciple who could turn the situation around with their own strength. Chapter 7:14. The organizers of the Dragon and Tiger tournament did an excellent job of guarding against Jun Changshao. They did not give him any chance to advertise. Therefore, when the tournament ended on the second day, the entire continent did not see his handsome face. The world was peaceful, and life was more beautiful. Of course. The advertising effect was still there. Especially when the sect of all times defeated the first-rate and second-rate sects and advanced to the third round, many boys and girls were tempted. When the tournament ends, I must go to Azure Sun County. I can't wait now. I heard that this sect's assessment is very strict. I wonder if I can pass. No matter which sect won the Dragon and Tiger tournament, the Iron Bone Mountain would soon attract a large number of youths to participate in the assessment. With the current number of people in the sect of all times, if they recruited another batch of disciples, they would undoubtedly be closer to reaching the maximum number of 20,000. The next day, Jun Changshao sat in the spectator area again. Shwa! 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 10 brothers stood in front of him, leaving only a gap for him to watch the battle. It was hard to find such treatment in the entire Starfall continent to be protected by so many Wu Huang. Let's welcome the participants. City Lord Han's deep voice sounded again. Shwa! Shwa! The disciples of the sect of all times strode into the venue, and the entire venue was filled with thunderous cheers. In a world where martial arts were respected, the strong were worshipped the most. Li Qingyang and the others had undoubtedly attracted countless fans in the first two rounds. Yi Xingchen! Yi Xingchen! A group of girls shouted excitedly. The male spectator's mouth twitched. That guy was so brutal yesterday, and you actually care so much about him? Are your brains kicked by a donkey? It was mainly because of Night Emperor's strong aura. Especially when he stood proudly with his arms crossed for the past 2 days, he was definitely a girl killer. Although Xiao Ziji's performance in the first round against the first-rate sects was amazing, many girls chose to ignore him because of his aura. Hearing someone call his name, Yi Xingchen frowned slightly and said, "A bunch of vulgar fans." Ah! Yi Xingchen is looking at me. That cold gaze is so handsome. I can't. 50 disciples entered the venue one after another. The old rules. The drawing of lots continued. Li Qingyang didn't say anything. He walked towards the drawing box and took out a token. After 2 bad matches, he finally won this time. The sect of all times drew a third-rate sect as their opponent for the third round. It's over, it's over. Despair appeared on the faces of the disciples who were hit. Especially when she looked at Yi Xingchen and recalled the horrifying scene of violence from yesterday. A chill ran down her spine from the soles of her feet. This third-rate sect is so pitiful. A moment of silence for them. The audience now had high hopes for the sect of all times. As long as they didn't meet a first-rate sect or a sect with a top genius, they would definitely advance to the next round. True enough. After drawing lots, the battle began. The sect of all times easily defeated this third-rate sect that the author didn't even bother to name. It's too simple. Su Xiaoma shook his head. It's not as satisfying as sparring in the sect. Li Qingyang said, this is only the third round. The later opponents will only be stronger. Don't let your guard down. A few hours later, the third round of battles ended. A total of 25 sects advanced to the fourth round. Today's battle was also an upset. The Iron Fist School defeated a second-rate sect from the Middle Continent with a third-rate sect. The two sects chose a chaotic battle mode. In the beginning, the second-rate sect definitely suppressed the Iron Fist School. However, Zhao Dezhuang relied on his strong physical body to send dozens of cultivators flying, directly establishing the victory. This was a classic example of relying on one person's strength to forcibly bring the sect to the next round. That guy is too strong. His body is like steel. He can still counterattack after taking on so many people's attacks. The Sect of all times' Xiao Ziji's defense is also not bad. When the two of them meet, they will definitely have an exciting physical battle. Everyone was looking forward to it. In the waiting area, Xiao Ziji's fighting spirit grew stronger after seeing Zhao Dezhuang's battle. 25 sects advanced. How would they be distributed? If there was a situation where they couldn't match all their opponents, the organizer would choose to give one sect a bye. Coincidentally, the sect that won the last round was all injured. The higher-ups of the sect assessed that they couldn't continue to fight in the next round and could only helplessly announce that they forfeited. The further they went, the more intense the battles became. It was not uncommon for both sides to be injured or to have a difficult victory. This was still considered good. At least the winner forfeited. In the previous Dragon and Tiger battle for supremacy, there would occasionally be two equally matched sections. They would fight until they were completely exhausted and unable to determine a winner. In the end, they could only return home together. The third day of battles ended. The initial excitement in the Azure Sun County and southwest Yangzhou gradually calmed down. Normally, a competition of this scale should get more difficult as it progressed. However, the Sect of all times gave them the feeling that it was getting easier as they fought. Especially the opponents in the third round, which could be said to be effortless. If they fought against a first-rate sect at the beginning and reached the peak, it would naturally be boring if they met weaker opponents later on. At this moment, the most exciting thing was that the Sect of all times' next opponent would be a first-rate sect. There are still 4 first-rate sects left. There is a high chance that they will be drawn tomorrow. TSK, a fifth-rate sect in the Dragon and Tiger battle for supremacy will meet 2 first-rate sections. Just thinking about it makes me excited. I hope that disciple called Li Qingyang doesn't wash his hands and gets drawn against a first-rate sect tomorrow. Although the battles in the past 2 days were exciting, the audience was more willing to see the Sect of all times fight against a first-rate sect. Only then would there be excitement. If one couldn't forget it, there would definitely be an echo. On the 4th day of the competition, Li Qingyang once again walked to the drawing table. When he stretched out his hand, City Lord Han loudly shouted, "The Sect of all times' opponent is Tiangang Sacred Sect. Another first-rate sect. Ha ha ha, there will be a good show to watch." The entire continent went into an uproar after City Lord Han's announcement. It can't be. Jun Changshao, who was under strict surveillance, face-bombed and said, "How did we meet a first-rate sect again?" In the Dragon and Tiger battle for supremacy, there had never been a low-level sect that would meet 2 first-rate sects consecutively. This was because if they did, they would definitely be eliminated. Second senior brother Yi Xingchen couldn't hold it in anymore and said in a low voice, "I'll draw tomorrow." Ever since Ao Wushuang provoked him, he wanted to be his opponent in the next round. However, every time he drew, he was disappointed. "All right," Li Qingyang said, "you'll do it tomorrow." Phew. Su Xiaoma exhaled and said, "The first 2 rounds were too easy. This round, we finally meet someone who can fight." Kacha! Kacha! Long Xiang, Song Xianzhou, and the others all rubbed their palms in anticipation. "Let's go." Li Qingyang strode forward. Su Xiaoma and the others followed closely behind. Their backs turned pitch black again, as if they had entered their demonic state again. The audience hoped that the Sect of all times would meet a strong opponent to show their dark horse potential. Naturally, they also hoped that they would meet a stronger opponent and not be defeated so easily like in the previous round. Ta ta ta! Li Qingyang and the others stood on the stage together. The projection array showed the scene one by one and gradually moved to the distance. The unyielding aura instantly filled the entire venue. Seeing the terrifying aura of the Sect of All Time's disciples, the elders of the various sects twitched their mouths. They were just a fifth-rate sect, but why were their special effects so awesome? Swoosh! Suddenly, Jun Changshao, who was sitting on the spectator stand, stood up. This sudden action shocked the 10 elders, and they all unleashed their cultivation as if they were facing a great enemy. Some of them even reached out to stop him. Tiangang Holy Sect! Jun Changshao clenched his fists and shouted, "Hold on!" Plop! The elders of the various sects all fell to the ground. Big brother, your disciples are here to fight, but you're here to be a joke. Tiangang Holy Sect, hold on! Tiangang Holy Sect, hold on! Following Jun Changshao's lead, the entire venue was filled with loud cheers. Chapter 7:15. In the battle between the Sect of All Times and Tiangang's sacred sect, Jun Changshao, as the patriarch, was actually cheering for the opponent. This caused the elders of the various sects to break down. Can you be more serious in such a sacred competition? Jun Changshao was very serious. Cheering for Tiangang's sacred sect was just like shouting. Facing their own monstrous disciple, they had to hold on and not be beaten to a pulp. The audience was spurred on and started to shout along with him. This was also the meaning behind it. It wasn't that Tiangang's sacred sect wasn't good enough, but that the Sect of All Times was too strong. They wanted to comfort and encourage the first-rate sections. Hearing the cheers from the audience, the faces of the Tiangang's sacred sect's higher-ups turned green. How much do they look down on us? Why are they cheering for us? Or, is the Sect of All Times so strong that they are invincible? Damn it! The Tiangang's sacred sect disciple who went up the stage had anger in his eyes. First-rate sects were the most dazzling existences wherever they went. Now that they were facing a fifth-rate sect, they were being pitted by the crowd. This was unacceptable. High-level sects had dignity, and no one could casually blaspheme it. Fight! They had to fight. Hoo-hoo! The Tiangang's sacred sect disciples' cultivation was fully unleashed. Anger and spiritual energy gathered together, and the aura they emitted was much stronger than the Grand Evolution sacred sect. Are you serious? Jun Changshao sat down and crossed his arms. This is interesting. Only by defeating the angry Tiangang's sacred sect disciple could they prove to the world that the Sect of All Times was strong. Babies! Jun Changshao said, use your strength to conquer more fans. On the stage, the referee walked up and said, do you want to fight one-on-one or in a chaotic battle? The Tiangang's sacred sect disciple said in a deep voice, chaotic battle. Their sect was very knowledgeable in formations, and it could be seen from the words Tiangang. Thus, they would definitely choose a group fight. Li Qingyang said, then let's have a chaotic battle. It would be a waste of time to fight one-on-one, so it would be better to fight with the other sects and have fun. The first battle of the fourth round of the Dragon Tiger battle for supremacy, both sides will have a chaotic battle. The referee shouted. Chaotic battle? Isn't this what Tiangang Saint Sect wants? This sect's Big Dipper formation is even more powerful than the Great Evolution Sacred Sect's Spiritual Illusion formation. The opponents I met in the first few rounds were too weak, so I haven't used it yet. Everyone's gazes immediately became heated. If the Tiangang Holy Sect could use their unique formation, it would definitely be an extremely exciting battle. The disciples of the Sect of All Times might not be able to withstand it. Begin! The referee shouted and quickly left the stage. Su Xiaoma, Li Fei, and the others clasped their hands together as they warmed up before the battle. The corners of their mouths curled up into a smile. Judging from the aura of the Tiangang Saint Sect's disciples, they were much stronger than the Great Development Saint Sect's disciples. Shwa! Shwa! At this moment, a Heavenly Dipper Saint Sect member stood on the spot and suddenly stretched out his palms. Paw! 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 Several disciples behind him quickly closed in and placed their palms on the backs of their fellow disciples to form a series. Then, they poured all their strength into the person at the front. Immediately, thick and heavy spiritual energy burst out of his palms. Third form of the Heavenly Dipper, Great Annihilation Palm. Buzz! Buzz! Spiritual energy suddenly burst out from his palms. Two faintly discernible palm prints came crashing down with a terrifying force. This kind of palm technique that was jointly used by many Tiangang Saint Sect disciples was very explosive. One could clearly see that the space seemed to have caved in due to the pressure. Big Dipper Formation. I didn't expect them to use it right from the start. Everyone was excited. Two seemingly invisible palms came crashing down with a force that shook the space. However, the disciples of the sect of all times who were standing on the stage looked indifferent. Ta-ta! Yang Yuhua rushed out from the crowd. During the process, she activated her spirit armor and put it on her body. Mountain Crumbling Fist. Boom! 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 The explosive spiritual energy was rampant in the stage. The two palms that came crashing down from the front were constantly pushed back by Yang Yuhua's fists. Dang dang dang! The few Tiangang Saint Sect disciples who were condensing their moves were pushed back by the palms. Their faces turned extremely ugly. The strength of the palms condensed by so many of them was comparable to that of a high-grade martial king. This sect of all times disciple was able to push them back with just her fists. Her strength was too terrifying. Boom! Boom! Long Xiang and Song Xianzhou rushed over from both sides. They gathered spiritual energy in their fists and crushed the two palms with overwhelming force. Dang! 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 The few Tiangang Saint Sect disciples were pushed back as the blood in their bodies began to boil. Change the formation! The leading disciple shouted. The 25 Tiangang Saint Sect disciples quickly separated and stepped on fixed points. They quickly formed strange hand seals. Bang! Bang! A soft sound came from the stage. Another 25 Tiangang Saint Sect disciples appeared out of thin air. Tiangang Ninth Style, Clone. Although those extra clones are illusions, they still contain 50% of the user's attack power. 50 against 25. This is a little tricky. Look, the disciples of the sect of all times are smiling. Everyone looked over, and sure enough, they saw a faint smile on the corners of those fellows' mouths, and their eyes flickered with the luster of burning battle intent. Go! Li Qingyang shouted. Swoosh! 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 Su Xiaoma and Li Fei rushed over with cloud-treading steps. Both of them unleashed their spiritual energy and gathered it at their feet. Instantly, they launched the coldest attack. The Tiangang Saint Sect disciples were fearless. They controlled their clones to meet the attack. Bang! Bang! In an instant, the two sects' disciples launched the most exciting battle on the stage. Great Annihilation Palm. Red Sky Flame Slash. Huff! Huff! All kinds of energy exploded, and the space in the area was shattered. Swoosh! Yi Xingqian rushed into the crowd and grabbed a Tiangang Saint Sect disciple's face with one hand. He dragged the disciple far away and slammed him on the ground. Boom! The disciple disappeared. Apparently, it was just a clone. Great Annihilation Palm. At this moment, a few Tiangang Saint Sect disciples gathered the third move of Tiangang and attacked from behind. Boom! Boom! Xiao Ziji, who was fully equipped, received the attack. Mind your own business. Yi Xingqian snorted. He used cloud-treading steps and rushed to the person who ambushed him. He punched him in the face and sent him flying. Boom! Boom! Su Xiaoma, Long Xiang, and the rest followed suit and destroyed the clones on the spot. Through the big screen, it could be seen that although the sect of all times had fewer disciples, they had the upper hand in the battle against the Tiangang Saint sect. Xiao Ziji and Yang Yuhua were the main defenders. Yi Xingchen, Li Qingyang, and the rest were the main attackers. Su Xiaoma and Li Fei made use of their speed to attack. The entire battle was fought in an orderly manner. The audience was dumbfounded. This was the first time they had seen a sect fight in such an artistic manner during a chaotic battle. The Tiangang Saint sect focused on various arrays and had strong teamwork. However, compared to the sect of all times, they were too weak. To be exact, they were completely crushed. Their strength and teamwork were not inferior to them. In fact, they were even stronger. How could they fight? Boom! Boom! 10 minutes later, the Tiangang Saint sect disciples were defeated one by the sect of all times' disciples. They had really worked hard. They had fought in their strongest state from the start. However, they still could not win against a bunch of cheaters. Tiangang Saint sect, hold on. Tiangang Saint sect, hold on. The audience stood up and shouted. Their voices shook the sky and had a tragic tone. Every time they shouted, the camera seemed to slow down infinitely. The Tiangang Saint sect disciples fell one by one in different postures and expressions. At that moment, the readers at the scene were all in tears. After a long time, City Lord Han's deep voice rang in the air. Tiangang Saint sect eliminated. Sect of all times advances. Chapter 7:16. In the end, Tiangang's sacred sect couldn't hold on and lost to the disciples of the sect of all times. However, it was a glorious defeat. After the battle ended, most of the disciples of the sect of all times were breathing rapidly. They were clearly very engrossed in the battle and had a great time. Thank you for letting me win. Li Qingyang cupped his hands with a friendly smile. Thank you for letting me win. The Tiangang sacred sect disciple who was lying on the ground cupped his hands with difficulty. The Tiangang array had evolved in various ways, but it couldn't do anything to the disciples of the sect of all times. Therefore, this disciple admitted his defeat wholeheartedly. Ha ha ha, we won again. Cheers came from Qingyang County. They didn't feel anything when they defeated a third-rate sect yesterday, but the excitement of defeating a first-rate sect today immediately returned. Sect Master, Sect Master. Quick! Quick! Pinch his philtrum. Huff huff. After the simplest rescue, Yi Tianqing jumped up from his chair. His expression kept changing. In the end, he squatted on the ground and covered his face. We won against a first-rate sect again. This isn't a coincidence. This isn't a coincidence. Elder Zhen and Elder Zhou could understand why their sect master was almost crazy. After all, their initial plan was for the sect of all times to break through the curse and advance to the second round. Now, not only did they meet the requirements, but they also defeated two first-rate sects consecutively. During the next meeting with the higher-ups of the certification center, the sect master would definitely hold his head high and be in high spirits. Everyone. At this moment, the long-awaited handsome face appeared on the array screen. These are the disciples of our sect of all times. They use their strength to prove that even if a first-rate sect is very strong, as long as you cultivate in the sect of all times, you can still create miracles. The sect elders were dumbfounded. Wasn't this guy being targeted by Ten Wu Huang? Why did he fly up again? Whoosh! Everyone lowered their heads. The 10 burly brothers were frozen in place. A very strong aura was emitted around them. This. The sect elders widened their eyes. How strong was the aura to directly suppress so many Wu Huang to the point where they couldn't move? People must have dreams, or else they are no different from salted fish. Jun Changxiao's entire face was about to melt into the array. He said, "The sect of all times is the place where you can realize your dreams. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and come, June Patriarch. A voice came from behind, that's enough. Wait for me to finish. June Changshao suddenly shut his mouth, and then fell down with his tail between his legs. This was because the person who had appeared behind him was none other than City Lord Han. Judging from his aura, he was definitely Wu Sheng. June Patriarch definitely couldn't afford to provoke such a powerhouse without relying on system items. Shwa! City Lord Han landed in front of June Changshao and said with his hands behind his back, "You guys can leave. I'll watch over June Patriarch." Yes. The 10 brothers disappeared. Just like that, in order to prevent June Changshao from advertising again, the top experts of the Starfall continent personally stood behind him. City Lord Han. June Patriarch said, "Do you have any children? Why don't you let them come to my sect of all times to cultivate? I guarantee that I will be able to nurture them into proud sons of heaven." City Lord Han had a good temper. If it was a hot-tempered rancor, he would definitely press this fellow's face to the ground and rub it with all his might. The 4th round of the competition continued, and it was also exceptionally fierce. This was because the sects that were able to reach this round all had extremely powerful cultivations. With Zhao Dazhuang and Jian Feiyun in charge of the third-rate sects, they had successfully occupied 2 of the top 12 spots. World-defying Sacred Sect had also cleanly defeated his opponent. Moreover, Ao Wushuang was truly strong. From the beginning to the end, he had been trampling on his opponent with the attitude of a king. However, this guy's ability to court death was also very outstanding. Every time he passed by Yixingchen, he would act extremely arrogant. To be able to defeat 2 first-rate sects, you do have some ability. Ao Wushuang stopped again, and said with a sinister smile, "But you better pray that you don't meet world-defying Sacred Sect in the next round, otherwise I will let you bunch of trash understand what absolute power is." Su Xiaomao and Li Fei frowned. If not for the fact that they were still participating in the Dragon-Tiger battle for hegemony, they would have already made their move. Young Patriarch. A disciple of the world-defying Sacred Sect said, "Let's go." Ao Wushuang picked up the black hair in front of his forehead and said indifferently, "A bunch of trash, see you tomorrow." Damn it. Su Xiaomao said angrily, "I really want to jump out and beat him up." Don't be impulsive. Li Qingyang said. If he fought privately in the arena, he would definitely lose the qualifications to participate. However, what surprised him was that Yixingchen, who was standing at the side, had a calm expression from start to finish, as if he did not hear the other party's ridicule. Could it be that junior brother Yi had changed his nature? Don't care what others say. No. Yixingchen did not change his nature. He was expressionless and speechless, but he was too lazy to pay attention to a guy who he had labeled as a dead man. The next day, under the cheers of the crowd, 12 sects entered the arena. Of the sects that could enter this round, 3 were first-rate, 2 were third-rate, 1 was fifth-rate, and the remaining 6 were second-rate. Please don't draw the sect of all times. When the drawing ceremony began, the disciples of the various sects all prayed, even the first-rate sects were no exception. No one thought that the sect of all times relied on luck to defeat the Great Development Sacred Sect and the Heavenly Dipper Sacred Sect. Instead, they had true strength. If they were to meet with them, they would definitely be eliminated. I'll do it. When the disciples of several sects chose their opponents one after another, and did not choose the world-defying Sacred Sect, Yixingchen was one step ahead of the others, and was the first to arrive at the drawing box. Shwa! He reached in and took it out. The opponent of the sect of all times is City Lord Han. Once again dragged out his voice, Iron Fist School. Crack! Yixingchen directly crushed the token, unable to hide the disappointment in his eyes. Phew! The sects that were not selected let out a sigh of relief. The Iron Fist School was also a dark horse, especially with Zhao Dazhuang's strength. The 2 sects meeting in this round was undoubtedly what they wanted to see the most. The 2 contestants with the strongest defensive performance have finally met. It will definitely be exciting. The audience did not care about who would win in the end, they only cared about whether Xiao Ziji and Zhao Dezhuang could put on an exciting battle. Junior brother, Li Qingyang said, I'll leave Zhao Dezhuang to you. And Xiao Ziji said. At that moment, his blood seemed to be burning, and the desire to fight surged in his heart. Zhao Dezhuang also had the same feeling. Therefore, the two of them looked at each other at the same time, and walked towards the stage at the same time. Two heavy auras suddenly gathered in the air, as if they had already begun to collide. On the stage, the referee asked, both sides, do you want to fight one-on-one or a chaotic battle? Fight one-on-one. Zhao Dezhuang said, 1 round to determine the winner. This, the referee looked at Xiao Ziji, and said, does your sect agree? Dragon and Tiger battle for hegemony was either a group of people fighting one-on-one, or a group of people fighting. There was no rule to determine the winner in 1 round. Of course, if someone suggested this way of playing, and the other side did not object, the organizer would definitely acquiesce. Xiao Ziji turned around and looked at his fellow sect members. After getting the answer from their smiles, he straightforwardly said, I agree. Chapter 7:17. Zhao Dezhuang's name sounded very tacky, but he was very smart. After a few rounds in the sect of all times, each of them could hold their own and had the ability to turn the situation around. There was no hope of advancing to the next round. Therefore, the only chance for the sect to advance was to decide the winner in 1 round. Without a doubt. Although Zhao Dezhuang was eager to battle with Xiao Ziji, he also hoped that the Iron Fist School could go further in the Dragon-Tiger battle for supremacy. His plan was very clumsy. Any sect that was slightly normal would not agree to it. However, Xiao Ziji agreed. He was willing to decide the winner in 1 round. Both contestants choose to fight one-on-one and decide the winner in 1 round. The referee's voice sounded. 1 round to decide the winner. The audience was dumbfounded when they heard this. The sect of all times had so many amazing disciples, but they only wanted to fight 1 round with the Iron Fist School. Was there a hole in their brain? Moreover, Zhao Dezhuang was very strong. Even if one of the sect of all times disciples could not defeat him, they could still send someone else. Now that they chose to decide the winner in 1 round, as long as Xiao Ziji lost, it would be equivalent to losing everything. Crazy. Of course he's crazy. All the martial artists shook their heads. In many people's opinion, the sect of all times would definitely win against the Iron Fist School. After all, the latter only had 1 Zhao Dezhuang, and the rest were all salted fish. However, choosing to decide the winner in 1 round was undoubtedly pushing oneself to the edge. What made the audience even more speechless was, when the camera panned to the sect of all times disciples, they all had smiles on their faces, as if they did not care that Xiao Ziji decided to decide the winner of the sect by himself. That was too big of a heart. All the martial artists could not understand the feelings between the sect of all times disciples that surpassed friendship. Since Xiao Ziji had met an evenly matched opponent in the Dragon-Tiger battle for supremacy, they had to cooperate with him and fight without any regrets. Not to mention deciding the winner in 1 round. If he wanted to, he could even decide the winner in 1 round. After all, they would not lose anything if they lost. At most, the Patriarch would just be squatting in a corner and crying. June Patriarch. City Lord Han asked, are you sure your noble sect wants to settle this in 1 round? Jun Changshao leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and said proudly, the disciples will decide the matters in the arena. I am only responsible for watching and being proud of them. City Lord Han was silent for a moment before saying, to be able to manage an obscure sect to such an extent in such a short time, this Han is truly impressed. He was definitely not being polite. So, Jun Changshao smiled and said, City Lord Han, have you thought it through and decided to send your children to my sect to cultivate? City Lord Han's mouth twitched. His 3 sentences were always about recruitment. Just how badly did he need disciples? Very little. He was short of over 80,000. Iron Fist School, Zhao Dezhuang. Sect of all times, Xiao Ziji. From the start of the dragon and tiger battle for supremacy until now, neither side's disciples had reported their names. It could be seen that Xiao Ziji and Zhao Dezhuang really regarded each other as strong opponents. If I don't write a few chapters, I'll be letting them down. Huff, huff, all of a sudden, a thick and heavy aura burst out from their bodies and collided madly in the air like a tidal wave. Before the match even started, their auras had already clashed. Exciting! After the two of them unleashed their auras, the entire venue suddenly became solemn. Even the referee was affected. He silently retreated, and then roared, veins bulging on his forehead, "Begin!" Huff, huff, as soon as his voice fell, violent spiritual energy burst out instantly, forming an earth-shattering aura that swept over instantly. Not good, the referee's face changed and he hurriedly retreated. Shwa! Shwa! On the stage, Xiao Ziji and Zhao Dezhuang unleashed their cultivation and moved at the same time. The aura around the two of them seemed to have turned into a dragon and a tiger respectively. They charged forward with great force. At that moment, the blood of the entire mainland's audience was boiling. After fighting for several days, only at the beginning of the match did they truly understand what was called a battle between a dragon and a tiger. Even City Lord Han, whose cultivation base had reached Wusheng's, couldn't help but stare at the stage. After all, these two young people were both moldable talents. What kind of wonderful sparks could they create when they meet? Just watch. He stretched out his right hand and pressed Jun Changshao, who was about to take off, back to his seat. Boom! Boom! On the stage, Xiao Ziji and Zhao Dezhuang had already begun their fierce battle. The two of them moved back and forth on the stage, waving their fists frequently, causing spiritual energy to ripple. That movement, that speed of the fists. It was so fast that it dazzled the eyes of the audience. Boom! Boom! The two of them exchanged a few blows while rushing forward and then quickly separated. The clothes on his body were completely shattered by the spiritual energy explosion, revealing muscles that could make a woman faint. Not bad. Zhao Dezhuang's eyes were burning. Although they had just exchanged blows, he could feel that his opponent's strength was very vigorous. He had definitely gone through a lot of tempering just like himself. Xiao Ziji's eyes were also filled with excitement. Ever since he embarked on the path of martial arts to refine his body to the extreme, this was the first time he met an opponent. Fight! 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 Shwa! Shwa! Xiao Ziji and Zhao Dezhuang rushed forward again. The two body maniacs didn't use any martial arts. They just used the purest and most primitive strength to attack each other. As the two of them continued to attack and exchange blows, the stage was filled with extremely strong male hormones. Please remember, this was a real man's battlefield. This was real passion radiating everywhere. Shwa! Shwa! The audience stood up one after another. They had been deeply stimulated by the bloody battle between the two of them. There were countless sissies in the crowd. During the battle between Xiao Ziji and Zhao Dezhuang, they withdrew their orchid fingers, spread their legs, removed the powder on their faces, and threw away the eyebrow pencil in their hands. Boom! Boom! Xiao Ziji and Zhao Dezhuang's battle became more and more intense. That kind of strong masculine aura crazily wreaked havoc in the entire venue, causing the eyes of countless men to shine with the most masculine luster. Bent. Today, all of them were straight. In the crowd, there are you and me. When we meet, we ponder over each other. In the crowd, there are you and me. Pretend to be righteous with a smile. A high-pitched voice suddenly sounded in the venue. Everyone was startled and turned their heads to look. Shwa! In the VIP spectator seats, Jun Changshao stood up and put one foot on the chair. He put the magically modified sound system of "Shame to Show Your Face" on his shoulder and shouted, "Fight like a man." City Lord Han's mouth twitched slightly. However, combined with the fierce battle below the stage and the strange voice that suddenly sounded, it seemed to be quite interesting. Boom! Boom! On the stage, Xiao Ziji and Zhao Dazhuang exchanged dozens of blows. Although the two of them were breathing slightly faster, their muscles were bulging, filled with the most masculine aura of men. This Xiao Dazhuang is indeed powerful. He is actually evenly matched with junior brother Xiao. Li Qingyang said. Tisk, Yi Xingchen coldly snorted. In his opinion, Xiao Ziji had just met an opponent with an extremely strong physical body and was eager to have a good fight. He had completely forgotten that this was a competition. This was a battle to determine the winner. Chapter 718. The battle between Xiao Ziji and Zhao Dazhuang, which didn't have any fancy moves, was truly hot-blooded. Especially the audience at the scene, they were deeply affected by the fist-to-flesh combat. Suddenly, a sense of pride rose in their hearts as they said, "I am proud of being a man." This was a real battle. This was the most manly battle. Those little fangirls who were originally focused on Yi Xingchen immediately became infatuated when they saw Xiao Ziji's muscles fully flexed. They had no stance at all. Boom! At this moment, an explosion came from the arena, and a wave of air rushed over. Ta! Ta! Xiao Ziji and Zhao Dazhuang both stabilized their bodies. The floor under their feet shattered, and visible ripples of spiritual energy spread out. The space in the area where the two had fought was completely distorted. Hey! Yi Xingchen impatiently transmitted his voice, "Hurry up and end it. Don't waste time." He knew that Xiao Ziji had entered a state where he only knew how to fight, so he had to remind him that this was a competition, and the winner had to be determined. Knight Emperor! How considerate! After receiving the reminder, Xiao Ziji gradually calmed down from his frenzied fighting state. Although this opponent was not bad, he was still carrying the fate of his sect's advancement. He had to defeat him as soon as possible. Huff huff, Xiao Ziji's fiery gaze turned sharp. Clearly, he had entered a state where he wanted to determine the winner and not just fight to his heart's content. Crack! His right foot suddenly stepped forward, and the original spot instantly caved in, and the caved-in spread to the surroundings. From the light screen of the formation, it could be clearly seen that the stone slabs within a few meters had all caved in, as if they had been hit by a heavy object. Not bad. City Lord Han praised. With just one step, he had pressed down the stone slabs with his powerful strength. It was impossible for him to do so without going through the daily tempering of his body. To be able to develop his body to such a degree at such a young age, it would definitely be indestructible when he broke through to a higher level in the future. Jun Changshao said, "Actually, my disciples are all not bad." "I can tell," City Lord Han said. Although the other disciples of the sect of all times did not appear to be as robust as Xiao Ziji's, it could be seen from the previous matches that they all had excellent physical bodies. "If I'm not wrong," City Lord Han said with a smile, "Jun Patriarch should have some exclusive technique to cultivate his body, right?" Jun Changshao said, "My sect's inheritance is from the ancient times. Naturally, we also have the body molding technique from the ancient times. Will you die if you don't brag?" The system said. "Fuck. I don't want to either, but I won't take this as a lie. How do you explain that your disciple is very strong?" Jun Changshao asked. The system said, "That's true. I've long heard that the sect of all times has an ancient heritage. However, I'm a little ignorant and didn't manage to find any records of your esteemed sect in the history books," City Lord Han said with a smile. Was he trying to figure out his background, or did he not think that the sect was from the ancient times? City Lord Han. Jun Changshao suppressed his voice and said, "To be honest, my sect of all times was once a darkness sect faction." Darkness sect? City Lord Han said, "No wonder." Jun Changshao could still detect a trace of doubt in his eyes, so he changed the topic. "Mayor Han, are you interested in having your children enter the sect of all times?" This, City Lord Han hurriedly looked at the battle stage and praised, "Wonderful, well fought. Could this guy be an overage single dog?" Jun Changshao muttered in his heart, "Does he have no children?" He was right. City Lord Han didn't even have a wife, let alone a child. He had been single for nearly 1,000 years. It was no wonder that whenever Jun Patriarch mentioned letting his children enter the sect, he would hurriedly change the topic. It was because at this moment, he was young and did not know the taste of sorrow. Only when he was old did he know the difficulty of the road. Scarlet Heaven Raging Flame Slash. Suddenly, Xiao Ziji's most masculine roar came from the battle stage, and a huge flame slash condensed in the air. He finally used his skill. He finally used his true strength. Ka Ka Ka, Xiao Zuiji, who cultivated the 5 elements heavenly reflection incantation, had already comprehended the fire element. When he executed this mid-level divine-grade martial skill in his strongest state, the scorching heat it emitted was akin to a giant hand tearing space apart. Very strong. City Lord Han said with a serious expression. When he said strong, he meant the skill was strong. Ta! Zhao Dazhuang took a step forward, and the stone floor under his feet shattered. His eyes flashed with fanaticism as he spread out his arms. Wang! His skin quickly turned golden, and he looked like a bronze statue from the Shaolin Temple. Indestructible diamond body. Everyone exclaimed. This. Jun Changxiao's mouth twitched. Isn't it the same as when I crushed the talisman of resistance back then? Huff huff. On the battle stage, the condensed scarlet sky flame slammed down from the sky. Zhao Dazhuang's eyes widened as he roared, "Diamond Glare Fist." Huff huff. Huff huff huff. Zhao Dazhuang's body was shrouded in golden light, and a Buddhist diamond appeared. In the air, a giant golden fist slammed down on the flame. Rumble, a deafening explosion reverberated throughout the arena. Ka ka ka. Under the force of the collision, the space around the battle stage began to crack. The destruction caused by the collision between the giant golden fist and the scarlet sky flame slash made all the spectators hold their breaths. This level of confrontation was definitely not something a low-level martial king should have. 2 extremely strong moves failed to do anything to each other, and a final burst of light erupted in the air before disappearing. Dang dang dang. Zhao Dazhuang retreated rapidly, and the Buddhist diamond glare collapsed. Although Xiao Ziji also retreated, he only retreated a few steps before charging forward like an arrow released from a bow. Huff huff, scorching flames rose in an instant, condensing into a slash mark in the air. Again. City Lord Han was shocked. This kind of fire element martial skill was extremely powerful, and it should consume a lot of spiritual energy. Scarlet Sky Flame Slash. Xiao Zuiji roared, and the flame slash that had gathered in the sky once again smashed down. The entire venue could feel the extremely violent heat. Zhao Dazhuang's eyes turned serious, and he immediately clasped his hands together, and a golden light instantly formed a defensive barrier in front of him. Boom! The scarlet sky flame slash slammed into the barrier, and although it did not shatter, a small crack appeared. Ta! Xiao Ziji had already charged in front of him, and he suddenly stretched out his hands and shouted angrily, "Landslide Fist!" Boom! 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 Dense fist marks burst out, just like the rubber machine gun used by the man who was determined to become the Pirate King. Boom boom boom. Huff huff huff. The explosive power was crazy and wanton, and the stone floor was shattered into powder, which instantly filled the entire battle stage. The martial artists of the various provinces could not see the fierce battle clearly through the light screen. The audience was dumbfounded. Although many people could use their spiritual senses to capture the scene of the battle, Xiao Ziji's punches were too fast, and they could not determine how many times he had punched. Gradually, the dust in the sky was blown away by the wind. Everything could be seen clearly, and 2 endless deep trenches appeared in the arena. Everyone opened their eyes wide. Because in their field of vision, Zhao Dazhuang's golden barrier existed in front of him, and although it was densely packed with cracks, it did not collapse. But he had already retreated from the battle stage to outside. Huff huff. Xiao Ziji, who was standing at the edge of the battle stage, half-squatted, and his hands were hanging by his side, breathing heavily. At this time, if he had a straw hat on his back, he would definitely be the one behind the N block. Caw! Suddenly, the golden barrier in front of Zhao Dezhuang collapsed, and he also bent down, breathing heavily. His eyes were filled with excitement, and also bitterness. Iron Fist School eliminated, and the winner is the Sect of all times. After a long time, the referee's loud and sonorous voice resounded in the arena. Plop! Xiao Ziji sat on the ground, and smiled at Zhao Dezhuang. If there is a chance, let's have a good fight again. Chapter 719. The golden barrier that Zhao Dezhuang condensed was the strongest defensive state of the invincible Vajra body. It could withstand Xiao Ziji's crazy attacks and remain unscathed. It was indeed very strong. However, no matter how strong the defense was, it could not withstand the crazy bombardment. Therefore, Zhao Dezhuang could only bring his strongest defensive state and was blasted out of the arena by Xiao Ziji. A battle of life and death was not important. However, the battle was limited to the arena. Once they left the restricted area, it meant that they had lost the battle. Both sides had an agreement before the battle. Therefore, the referee directly announced that the Iron Fist School was eliminated and the Sect of all times advanced. Sigh. Zhao Dezhuang sighed. Although he was unwilling, since he had lost, he had to accept reality. All right. He tried to straighten his body and said, if there's time, let's fight again. The two fought very happily, but because they both had to consider the Sect, it was inevitable that they would have many regrets. If there was a chance in the future, they would definitely have a good spar. It's a deal. It's a deal. Xiao Ziji and Zhao Dezhuang looked at each other and smiled. This kind of agreement between men was worthy of respect. TSK, TSK. City Lord Han exclaimed, June Patriarch, your disciple's physical body is not only strong, but his strength is also very strong. As an expert, he could see that although Zhao Dezhuang was not bad, he was only good at defense. In all the previous battles, he relied on brute force and his opponent could do nothing about it. Xiao Ziji was different. Not only was his defense strong, but he also had attack power. Even if both sides were to fight again in their best condition, the result would still be the same. No matter how strong the defense was, as long as there was no attack power, he would be a moving sandbag. Jun Changshao smiled brightly and said, therefore, I am proud of my disciple. He vaguely remembered the scene when he first met Xiao Ziji. He also recalled the tears he shed day and night in the forging room and the training tower. If this was in an anime, the battle between Xiao Ziji and Zhao Dezhuang would take 2 or 3 episodes just to recall the sacrifice and the back view of the sunset tempering his body. Qingyang County. When the referee announced that the Sect of all times had won, the crowd once again turned into a sea of excitement. Many men were so excited that they tore off their shirts and even hugged their companions. He won again, he won again. Xie Guanquan stood in the city lord's mansion, his heart filled with excitement. In the certification hall of the Heavenly Mandate Imperial City, before the referee announced the result, Elder Zhou quickly stuffed a pill into Yi Tianqing's mouth. It was an elixir that prevented qi and blood from attacking the heart and causing sudden death. If placed on Earth, it would be called Who? After taking the medicine, Yi Tianqing laid on the chair and held on to the handle. He was extremely emotional as he said, Tomorrow, prepare a bed for me. I want to lie down and watch, Shua. Elder Zhen hurriedly stuffed another medicinal pill into his mouth, thereby activating the double activation to protect the dojo master's heart. The battle between the Sect of all times and the Iron Fist School had ended. However, the battle between Xiao Ziji and Zhao Dezhuang still appeared in their minds. The more they thought about it, the more excited they became. The more they thought about it, the more satisfied they felt. 3,000 sword shadows. At this moment, a cold shout came from the arena. Shwa! Shwa! Dense sword chi exploded in an instant. The number of sword chi made everyone's eyes widen. Clang! Jian Feiyun sheathed his sword. Plop! The disciple who was fighting with Jian Feiyun collapsed to the ground. Dense sword marks appeared on the ground behind him, but the word human was left empty in the middle. This meant that although there were many sword chi, they did not cause any harm to him. They just brushed past him. This extremely strong control made all the warriors present widen their eyes. Continue. Jian Feiyun raised his head. His long and narrow eyes shone with a light as sharp as a sword. The disciples opposite him all took 2 steps back in shock. What are you afraid of? We are a second-rate sect in the Zhongzhuang state. Let me. Clang. Plop. That disciple fell to the ground again. Although there were no wounds on his body, the feeling of countless sword chi brushing past him was like experiencing death again and again. Junior Zhou. Li Qingyang said, this person is very strong. N. Zhou Hong said, I hope to meet him in the next round. Although this guy was always on the stage in the previous rounds, he did not fight many times. Therefore, everyone gave him the evaluation Sect of all times' strongest king of water. Why don't you draw next round? Li Qingyang said. Before Zhou Hong could say anything, Yi Xingchen said coldly, let me do it. World-defying Sacred Sect had already smoothly advanced to the next round, so he had to draw tomorrow and personally end that dead man. Dusk came and the battle ended. The top 6 were Sect of all times, Spirit Sword Sect, World-defying Sacred Sect, and 3 other first-rate sects that had always been there but never had a name. Tomorrow's battle for the top 3 will definitely be more exciting. Sect of all times, these 3 sects might be matched with the first-rate sections. It's hard to say. In the next round, the first-rate sects won't have the right to protect, so they might be matched. TSK, the battle between the first-rate sects should be very exciting. The next day, when Yi Xingchen once again stood in front of the lottery box and took out his card, he almost dropped it and fiercely stepped on it twice. Let me abuse him. Was it that hard? Sect of all times' opponent is City Lord Han stood behind Jun Changshao and pressed on his shoulder. Spirit Sword Sect. Senior Brother Yi. Zhou Hong cast a grateful look and said, thank you. Yi Xingchen, after the draw, Sect of all times versus Spirit Sword Sect, World-defying Sacred Sect versus a first-rate sect, and the other 2 first-rate sects met. Begin. The referee shouted loudly. Aha! Su Xiaoma yawned and then squatted at the edge of the stage with Li Fei and the others. The Spirit Sword Sect disciples were the same. Why? Because the Sect of all times and the Spirit Sword Sect chose to fight one-on-one. The first to fight were Jian Feiyun and Zhou Hong. When the 2 of them unleashed their sword force, it was destined to be a boring battle. How boring was it? The 2 of them stood motionless on the stage for more than 10 minutes, to the point that the audience was yawning and crying. The layman watched the show, while the expert watched the door. Many martial artists in the way of the sword could deduce that this Jian Feiyun and the Sect of all times should have already used their sword force to fight. It was just that it was invisible and formless, unable to give the author a chance to write. Clang! Clang! An hour later, Zhou Hong and Jian Feiyun finally moved. 2 unparalleled sword chi cut through the void and shot out. The 2 swords were extremely stunning, as if they came from beyond the heavens. However, in a flash, clang! Clang! At the same time, the 2 of them sheathed their swords. Shwa! Jian Feiyun turned around and jumped off the stage, saying, your sword is faster. Su Xiaoma stared at him and said, it's over. Those who were attentive would notice that when the Spirit Sword Sect disciple walked down the stage, a very fine sword mark appeared on the side of his neck. Because the size was just right, there was no blood oozing out. Next! Ding! 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 The battle continued. The remaining disciples of the Spirit Sword sect had a good understanding of the way of the sword, but they were defeated one by Li Qingyang and the others who were equipped with excellent swords. Spirit Sword sect eliminated, Sect of all times advanced. The referee announced loudly. After hearing this, Yi Tianqing peacefully took a few pills, then laid down on the bed that was prepared in advance, and said, "If it's a dream, then let me keep dreaming." The match continued. The world-defying sacred sect, led by Ao Wushuang, smoothly entered the top 3. However, in the other match, the two first-rate sects were evenly matched. They fought until they were all lying on the ground, and then announced that they would return home hand in hand. Finals. City Lord Han pressed down on Jun Changshao and said loudly, "Sect of all times against world-defying sacred sect." Shua! Yi Xingqian jumped onto the stage, looked at Ao Wushuang, and said, "Trash, I've tolerated you for a long time. Junior brother." The corner of Li Qingyang's mouth twitched. The final battle is tomorrow. Chapter 720. The next day. Several stages in the venue were gathered together to form an even larger stage. This was a professional stage for the finals. Not only had it been modified, but it was also reinforced by dozens of array masters. Regardless of height, width, or thickness, it was stronger than before. If you rubbed June Patriarch's face on it, you might not even be able to hurt a stone slab. So magnificent. The audience that entered the venue gradually realized that today's finals would be very exciting when they saw the tall stage. Let's welcome the disciples of the Sect of all times and the world-defying sacred sect. City Lord Han's heavy voice resounded through the venue and transmitted to the entire continent through the screen. The projection array gave a lens that showed this expert standing on the VIP platform with one hand on Jun Changxiao's shoulder. Ever since City Lord Han was personally supervising, that guy had never brushed his face on the array again. Tsk tisk. Someone said, Wuxing never leaves his side. His treatment is already very good. This advertisement is too crazy. This is the first time I've seen such a shameless patriarch. After a few days of fighting, many people remembered that awesome disciple of a fifth-rate sect and also remembered that shameless patriarch. Shua! At this moment, Jun Changxiao opened his arms and pulled out a banner from thin air. From the lens, one could clearly see a line of words written on it. The content was "Join my sect and let your dreams fly together." After going back yesterday, he pondered for a long time and finally thought of this move. The lens just happened to give City Lord Han a close-up shot, so Jun Patriarch pulled out a banner and a line of words instantly stole the limelight. Everyone's mouth twitched. This was truly a frenzied fight, a fight to the point of chi deviation. City Lord Han's expression also became interesting and hurriedly sent a message to the array master to turn the lens away. It was worth it. At least it would appear for a few seconds. If this was on some large-scale party or variety show on Earth, just a few seconds of advertising would be expensive. City Lord Han collapsed. It's impossible to guard against. He stopped that guy from flying up and brushing his face, but did not stop him from continuing to advertise by pulling out a banner. Forget it, forget it. Today was the last match, so he had to bear with it a little longer. City Lord Han forcefully retracted his urge to press Jun Changxiao onto the floor and rub his face against it. Shua! Shua! At this moment, the 25 disciples representing the Sect of all times walked up one by one. However, the expression on City Lord Han's face changed again. On the front of the clothes that these disciples were wearing, there was a sign that said, "Sect of all times, you are the only choice. You have a good plan, but I have a way out. If you don't want to give me any footage, then I'll just put up advertisements on all the disciples' uniforms. I don't believe that you won't give me any footage of the battle. I can't take it anymore." Many of the audience went crazy when they saw the slogan on the Sect of all times' clothes. City Lord Han's mouth twitched violently. How could he break this move? Were they supposed to go back to the waiting room and change again? But the world-defying sacred sect disciple has already entered the arena. Naturally it is too late. City Lord Han could only continue to contact the array masters, instructing them to give the Sect of All Times' disciples a view of the back of the arena after both sides' disciples went up to the stage. Shwa! Shwa! Not long after, the world-defying sacred sect disciple led by Ao Wushuang stood on the stage. The camera of the projection array also turned from the front to the back. Fuck! City Lord Han couldn't help but curse. The 25 disciples of the Sect of All Times had their backs to the camera, with a word written on their clothes. Combined together, it was "My Sect of All Times has been passed down from ancient times, in accordance with the principle of benefiting all living things, sincerely recruiting heroes of the world." Including 2 commas and an exclamation mark, it was exactly 25 words. Moreover, the font was very large, occupying the entire back. When the camera gave a close-up of the back, it directly occupied the screen. Both the front and back, just ask you how to break it. At that moment, City Lord Han almost couldn't help but turn off the projection array. However, all the provinces and cities had paid the money and had the qualifications to obtain the image. If he turned it off in the finals, it would cause an uproar. City Lord Han. Jun Changshao said in a low voice, "Next time, if the Dragon Tiger battle for hegemony is held, we can open the bidding. There will definitely be people willing to spend a lot of money to buy the advertising space. When the time comes, the organizers will definitely make a lot of money." Although City Lord Han was devastated, he felt that it made sense after thinking about it. Therefore, in the lower realm, he continued to apply for the Dragon Tiger battle for hegemony and followed Jun Changshao's suggestion. Since then, the Dragon Tiger battle for hegemony had embarked on a path of no return of showing advertisements during the day and advertisements during the night. It had developed to the point of madness and was ridiculed by the later generations as Dragon Tiger battle for hegemony in advertisements. In a world where the concept of advertisements was not too strong, Jun Changshao, with his earthling mindset, was crazily wreaking havoc. The most typical example was the clothing. As the disciples of the Sect of All Times shone brightly in the Dragon Tiger battle for hegemony, it was bound to set off a new round of reform. At that time, everyone would be wearing Tang suits and Chong Sams. It would be normal for people to casually call them old friends. In the arena, the disciples of the 2 sects faced each other, and the atmosphere instantly became tense. This atmosphere came from only one person. That's right. It's him, our Fei Anu. Yi Xingchen kept staring at Ao Wushuang. In his emotionless eyes, it was as if he was looking at a cold, dead person. "Junior brother." Li Qingyang said telepathically, "This is the last battle. You must control your emotions. Don't kill anyone. Otherwise, the patriarch will be in trouble." Eldest senior sister was cold and taciturn. At this time, only he could mediate. After all, he had the hidden ID of Chief of Internal Affairs above his head. Yi Xingchen said, "I only want half of his life." Li Qingyang's mouth twitched. "Ha!" At this moment, Ao Wushuang said calmly, "You guys actually made it to the finals. I take back what I said earlier. You guys are better than the other trash." "Of course." He grinned and said, "Don't be so happy. No matter how good you are, you're still trash." Crack! Su Xiaoma, Li Fei, and the others clenched their fists. Their eyes flashed with anger. Li Qingyang, who had always been good-tempered, heard Ao Wushuang's words and said in a deep voice, "Junior brother, half of your life then." Young Master Ao Patriarch is really arrogant. World-defying sacred sect's unique mental cultivation method is Ao Tianju. The higher the level of comprehension, the more arrogant his personality is. How did this kind of sect develop? I heard that there is another mental cultivation method that can counteract arrogance. However, this young Master Ao Patriarch did not cultivate it, so he has always been arrogant. No wonder, no wonder. Everyone whispered and understood why Ao Wushuang was so arrogant. Kid. Jun Changshao leaned on the chair, his arm on his leg, his chin on the back of his hand, and said, "You are using your own life to explore the depths of hell." He had seen arrogant disciples before, but this was the first time he had seen such an arrogant guy. As the little King Kong of the death-seeking realm, he was a little defeated. Are the two sides fighting one-on-one or a big fight? The referee walked up, but he always maintained absolute vigilance because the arena was filled with the smell of gunpowder. One-on-one. Ao Wushuang and Yixingchen said in unison. The referee hurriedly announced, Dragon Tiger Battle Hegemony Finals, both sides choose to fight one-on-one. It's starting. The audience held their breaths. The referee looked at the disciples on both sides and said, "Who will fight first?" Ao Wushuang took a step forward and said indifferently, "To deal with this kind of outstanding trash, naturally this young master patriarch will fight alone and send them all back to the trash heap." Yixingchen walked up. The more he was about to torture a dead person, the calmer he was. "Junior brother Yi." Su Xiaoma and the others transmitted their voices, "This guy will be handed over to you. You must torture half of his life."